what's the, one of those, I got on that agenda. Hopefully, but we gonna meet after this to determine, but, about zoning land use planning.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
great.
I'd like for those to be the priority for local.
Well, I would love to, potentially work with you to put a, to present on our solar recommendation.
Yeah, our problem, if you will, that today's August 30th, and the motor is September 25th. It was full timeline instead of a full one. We got this before we put this together. But I think we got our thoughts together. Nathan's been doing a bunch of research. He is, and I'm surprised the number of people in Georgia that he's given me the phone numbers and the names of people that are working on this.
So how did the first meeting go? What are your, well, we can talk later about it. What are your
First
priorities?
meeting went well. I mean, we had, what we were trying to do in the first meeting was, we were trying to lay the groundwork of why this committee, why are we doing this? The whole purpose is, why are we doing this? Why are we even concerned about it? Okay, that was the ground. Now here going forward is just building more and more information. Yeah, we had, oh Lord, Tyler Harper spoke. We had this lady, I forget, but she spoke on, no, spoke on how many acres have been lost.
Oh, Catherine Moore.
That's it. She spoke, did a great job. I mean, so the main thing was just saying, hey, this is why, this is why, this is why, you know. Now, what I'd be open if you want to do it. Nathan has done me a summary of every speaker. And if you want to ask him to give you that summary, that'd be more than likely.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. Appreciate
Hey,
it. Thank you. You blew me away. I'm sorry about that. Well, I'm waiting. Hey, it's almost like being in church and the piano started playing. Everybody got kind of quiet. What a great crowd here today. We really appreciate this. First time I've ever been, I think this may be the first time Joy and I ever been to Cornelia, Georgia. And we really appreciate the hospitality and the friendliness and the smiling faces here. It really makes it great. Makes us feel good. We're going to start it off with Senator Hatchett. Where's Senator Hatchett? There he is, Senator Bo Hatchett. Now, he may be a little bit dragging today because last night was his wife's birthday, and I'm sure they got out and they probably drank a few glasses of wine and all that kind of stuff. So Bo, thank you for being here.
If by wine you mean Mott's apple juice with 4 little girls, you would be correct. But no, thank y'all for coming. This is obviously very important. It's important to this district. It's important to me. With the urban sprawl and people coming to Georgia, it's time now more than ever to preserve our Georgia farmlands. Mr. Hatfield in the back, thank you for being here. He's obviously affiliated with Fielddale, and that's what we have up here for the most part. We've got a lot of poultry. Northeast Georgia, North Georgia is very different from the row crops you see in South Georgia. And so when we talk about preservation of farmland, I think it's very important for this committee to see the perspective that we have here, because it's going to be different. There are different needs in Northeast Georgia than you see in South Georgia. So I want to thank Senator Hickman for allowing his committee to come up here. Habersham EMC, thank you all for hosting. This is a great room, and I look forward to good conversation today, and hopefully we can come up with some good policy that will ensure the future of agriculture for the state of Georgia, not just in South Georgia, Middle Georgia, but in Northeast Georgia too. I see a lot of familiar faces. The Kowalskis, thank y'all for being here, and hopefully we get a lot of work done today. Senator Hickman, if it's okay, I'd like to open us up in a word of prayer. If you would, bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. You can feel the crisp in the air as autumn approaches. Please, speak to us and through us today, and open our minds and help us to come up with good policies and have good information that will help further the agricultural industry in the state of Georgia. Please be with these legislators as they travel home, and with every member here as they travel home. Keep them safe. And in your name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much. Thank y'all.
So the next order of business is if y'all would all please stand, we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. Then Joanne's going to lead us in singing God Bless America. Okay. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, remain standing and y'all sing. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with love. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home.
We always feel like that kind of sets the tone for any meeting. We're so fortunate. People all the time ask me, and I'm sure they ask the other senators, are y'all Christians? And I know that's probably not the thing to say here today, but I said, yeah, I know in the Senate Republicans are, because every morning we have a prayer at breakfast, and then we have a prayer when we go into session. And then every committee meeting that I'm involved in, and I'm sure these other guys are involved in, is open with a prayer too. So thank you both for that. And thank you for your welcoming us to this great facility in town. And at this point in time, we're going to ask Mr. Brian Ferguson, President and CEO of Habersham EMC, to come forward.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. Welcome. So good morning. I'm Brian Ferguson, President and CEO of Habersham EMC. Want to welcome you to Habersham EMC and the Ray Metters Community Room. Mr. Metters, who the room is named after, was a farmer from White County. And in the back, you see his picture with his tractor. And I thought that was very appropriate for today's meeting to recognize Mr. Metters and tell a little bit about our culture and who we are here in Northeast Georgia. So as I look around the the room, I see a lot of familiar faces. Happy to be with you today. Glad you could be here at Habersham EMC, and I'm glad that we could host this. Senator Hatchett, thank you for reaching out to secure the room and have the committee meeting here. And Senator Hatchett, thank you for what you do in our region, in our state. So thank you. Habersham EMC is fortunate to serve our members, industries, and communities across 6 counties in Northeast Georgia. And I'll say 6 of the most beautiful Northeast Georgia mountain counties. You can see the outline of our service territory in Northeast Georgia. And Senator Hickman told me I had, 30 minutes to speak? And I told him that maybe 10 minutes, but I do have a video I want to share with you real quick to tell a little bit about, Habersham EMC, our region, and our commitment to serving agriculture and industries and our residential members.
Some call us by our official name, Habersham Electric Membership Corporation. Others, Habersham EMC. Most just call us HEMC. But no matter how you say our name, we are here for you. We are here providing excellent service, high reliability, and affordable prices to our members. So for all the things you do here in Northeast Georgia that make it home, whether that's shopping, dining, gathering for worship, working in the agricultural industry, or making a product to share with the world, we are here for you. We're here when the storms hit. From our early beginnings of building lines to our revolutionary 100% fiber network on our smart grid system, backed by a 24/7, 365 technologically advanced dispatch center, the goal has always been the same: to get your electric service back on quickly and safely. We're always advancing technologies to benefit our members and our communities with amazing innovations like electric vehicles and solar. Even with all of the amazing technology in place, we're still here for you when you need to talk to us, in person, on the phone, or online. We are HEMC, Habersham EMC, Habersham Electric Membership Corporation. No matter how you say our name, we are here for you.
All right, so just a little bit about us in the areas that we serve. So in addition to providing electric service, Habersham EMC also owns and operates a 100% fiber optic broadband company, Trailway Fiber, providing internet services to over 12,000 subscribers. And I'll say a large portion of that is our agricultural community. So out of the members and industries that we serve here at Habersham EMC, the agricultural industry is by far our largest customer. We value you as a key account customer. So some of the areas that different segments that we serve, poultry, Mr. Hatfield, poultry is our largest industry. And there's a lot of poultry farmers in here, and we appreciate that. So poultry, cattle, swine, dairy, vineyards, orchards, row crops, so fruits and vegetables. We have beekeeping, plant nurseries, timber. So we have a very diverse agricultural community in Northeast Georgia that we're proud to serve. proud to be a part of. So thank you. I want to thank every one of you in the ag community, the farmers. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your vital role. Thank you for the products that you produce, that help sustain us. So recently, we had Dominic LaRicchia from the Field Services Director for Georgia Department of Agriculture here to talk with us and talk with our agriculture community. And he tied together how important it is for electric power companies and internet providers to focus on our ag community as our technology changes and connectivity is so important to not just residential and businesses, but to the farm and agricultural community as well. So we're here to serve you in that arena as well. So again, thank you for allowing Habersham EMC to host this event. Thank you to our agricultural community. Thank you to all of our elected officials. Mr. Hickman, thank you for being with us today here, and hope you enjoy your time with us today and have a great day.
Thank you so much, sir. We do have a public comment sign-up sheet, so I'm gonna take it and move it to the end of the table down here, because that will give everybody a little more access to it. We already have 6 people signed up to talk, so feel free. We're gonna give you somewhere around 4 to 5 minutes, according to how much time we have left at the end. I apologize for not recognizing earlier, even though he's talking right now, Drew Eccles, who is a great friend of all of ours in the Senate. His wife Shelley just retired, and Drew is going to replace her in the Senate. And we appreciate you, Drew, being here today. Thank you for your support. Do we have any other representatives for senators? I hope I didn't overlook anybody. We do have a former representative, Mr. Dover, sitting right here on the front row, and he signed up to speak about the CUBA stuff at the end of our meeting. So good. So let me tell you. I tell you, first of all, let's introduce each other. Senator Watson, start with yourself. Tell us. I think he may have drove. No, or maybe Senator Goodman. One of y'all drove the furthest. But tell us where you're at, what you do for a living, what committees you're on, and so forth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be here. I had about a 4.5, 5-hour drive to get here from Moultrie. I was giving Jason Bragg a hard time because EMC went into load management from 4 to 7 yesterday, and I had to wait till 7 o'clock to turn pivots on. But before I could get on the road and get up here. But always I'll drive anywhere to talk about agriculture and anything we can do to support agriculture. So good to be here, and I love the crisp, cool air up here, no gnats. So I stopped in at J-Moore and got some peaches on the way up here. If it was Moultrie, it'd be hot and you'd be swatting gnats the whole time. But anyway, I farm in Coffee County, Moultrie, and grow vegetables down there, and also have beef. And so agriculture is what I do for a living, and so this is very important to me. It's an honor to serve in the state senate. And serve on the Ag Committee, and Economic Development Committee, SLOGO Committee, and a few other ones, appropriations. But it's good to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
And a former House member.
And served in the House for 10 years.
Thank you. Senator Goodman?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is good to be here with y'all today. I think I may have had the farthest by about an hour. I live in the Flatwoods of South Georgia. My name's Russ Goodman. I'm a blueberry farmer, and also we have a business. We make fruit cobblers, and we're in the timber business. I serve as chairman of the Senate Ag Committee. I want to thank y'all really for sending Bo Hatchett and Drew Eccles to Atlanta, because I'm gonna tell you, it's really important that we have people up there that support agriculture. And sometimes our accents might be a little bit different, and our agriculture may be a little bit different, but the folks in North Georgia and South Georgia are the same people, you know. And with Bo and I came in together. We were floor leaders for the governor together, and it is mighty important. Sam and I are farmers, And it's mighty important that you have somebody that is an attorney that you trust, that you know that they've got the best interests of agriculture at heart to read some of these bills. And I really appreciate y'all sending both of them up there. I tell everybody we need more cowboy boots and less wingtips in Atlanta. I also wanted to recognize Catherine Russell's here from the Department of Ag. Patrick Guthrie is, and then Brad Vaughn as well from the Lieutenant Governor's office. Brad has really worked with Chairman Hickman on this issue, been to a lot of meetings all over the state. I also serve on, I guess I forgot about that, I also serve on public safety and retirement and natural resources. So I look forward to this. I told, we had a meeting here the other day talking about preservation of farmland, and someone stated that the biggest threat to the preservation of farmland was rooftops and subdivisions. And I told him, I said, well, I think the biggest threat to the preservation of farmland might be that farmers can't make a living farming right now, at least not in my part of the country. But thank you for your leadership on this, and thank y'all for being here. I'm sure I've probably forgotten something, and I apologize for that, but glad to be here.
And Senator Goodman is chairman of the Agriculture Committee in the Senate, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think we also have Senator Jason Anabatardi on Zoom today watching us too. So he's here. And Jason is our caucus chairman and just on a bunch of committees. But is he available to speak?
Hey, Billy, how are you?
There he is.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? How are you?
There you go. Jason, the floor is yours.
All right. How's everyone doing? Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Just want to say hello and thank you for everybody in Habersham County for hosting us. Our colleague, Senator Hatchett, good to see you on the screen. Looks like you're almost ready for the weekend. But just want to thank everybody for their hard work on ag issues, and my colleagues that are there in the room and some of those that are not here today for fighting a lot of the issues that, I know are important to you. But I know as Chairman Goodman would tell you, and I will tell you, the broader implications that we're seeing with farmers, not just across Georgia, across the country, from a national security perspective. The work we did to pass Senate Bill 420 to protect, China or fight China from buying U.S. Land in Georgia. And so we're going to continue to do that. So just appreciate to listen and be available if you need me after today's meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Let us tell you a little bit about how we got here, or why we're here, or why did this committee get created, study committee get created. Part of what we learned, and it actually came through some stuff that Senator Goodman had, that since 1974 in Georgia, we've lost 2.6 million acres of land, and that number is probably a couple years old now, so it's probably closer to 2.8 million acres now. And I think it's somewhere around 1 million acres of timberland. That's, when I say land, I'm talking about 2.6 million is a crop land, pasture land, that type of thing. And so what's happening, when all this stuff came about, it really hit me harder in our area, because the big gorilla in our town for many years have been Georgia Southern University, and we're just so proud of it. But now with the Hyundai plant coming, it really has put a tremendous whatever on our farmland. And it's because I had a client, I'm a CPA, and had a client in office earlier this week, actually yesterday before I left. The farm's about 1,000 acres, and part of the farm is on one of our major corridors, and 137 acres, he got offered 60,000 acre for it this week. And he's struggling with that. But you know what I told him? I said, hold off, you're gonna get more. You're gonna get more, and that's gonna happen. So that's what's got this thing. I'm a CPA, I represent farmers. I'm a part-time farmer, about 300 acre joint. I got a 300 acre farm of 25, 30 head of cows, 100 pecan trees, and rest of some pine trees. But so I understand a little bit, raised around farm, picked tobacco, cropped, you didn't pick tobacco, you cropped tobacco, right, Russ? You crop
Yes,
tobacco.
yes,
You
sir.
crop
I've
tobacco.
I've sandblood
Yeah.
tobacco.
You crop tobacco and all that. So understand the importance of it, but you also understand the importance of how we've got to provide jobs for our children. Because what we do know, if we don't provide jobs for our children will move away from us and go live somewhere else. When I was campaigning in Claxton, Georgia, I was talking to a lady and in class, I said, "You got children?" She said, "Yes, I got 2 sons." I swear they had. She said, "Charlotte and Nashville." I said, "Why are they there?" She said, "They have no job opportunities here in Claxton." I said, "You realize the fact that your children are not here, your grandchildren will never be here." And I said, "The fact that you won't have the opportunity to pick up your grandchildren at school and take them by Dairy Queen in the afternoon, or your neighbor will have the opportunity." And she started crying. So it's a very sensitive issue. So we got to look at both sides of it. We got to be careful. We got to protect the farmland. We know we all want to eat. We all want to have that luxury, but we also know that if we ever get dependent on the world for food, we're in a mess too. So that's why it's so important for these 2 guys here, Senator Goodman and Senator Watson, to continue farming. So where this bill came about is called the Preservation of Georgia Farmland. It's Senate Resolution 470. 3 of the 5 signers of this bill are full-time farmers. One of them is a part-time farmer, that being me, and then also Steve Gooch, who is the majority leader in the Senate. I love this quote by Catherine Moore. She said, "The greatest hindrance to agriculture is unplanned growth." And you think about that. We went down I-16 the other day going to Savannah and looked over the field that for years was a peanut or cotton field. And it's got 3 houses stuck out in the middle of it now. So you know what? That's no longer a peanut or cotton field. So we worked on this, and we're very fortunate to got 100% of the senators signed off on and agreed to it. On our study committee is Senator Anna Matardi, you saw earlier, Senator Brandon Beach, who is on his way to California to watch LSU and I think USC play. Jason Esteves, who is on the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee. Russ Goodman, who is here today on the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee Chairman. Freddie Powell Sims on the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs. Senator Sam Watson and myself. Protect agriculture and provide jobs. I don't know. People say, is there a balance? I don't know if there's a balance as much as there's awareness of what we need, awareness of the importance of this. This was in the resolution. Whereas the Senate should evaluate farmland protection measures implemented in other agricultural states and seek the advice of experts while we're here today in agricultural economics, tax policy, land management, economic development, environmental law and policy, and other disciplines in considering additional measures that may be necessary and appropriate for Georgia. Pretty cool. Let me just tell you this right up front is our first meeting was in Statesboro in July, August 30th here. We will, in September 25th, I'm just telling you this ahead of time, we're going to move to Senator Watson's part of the world, Moultrie, Georgia at Ag Expo. October 28th, we're going to move to Senator Anna Matardi's area, Cedartown, Georgia, at Cedartown High School, College and Career Academy, and then we'll finish up in November at the Capitol. So thank y'all. Now, with our first speaker today is Mike Giles with the Georgia Poultry Commission, the Georgia Poultry Federation. Mike, come forward. Thank you, Mike, for doing this for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the study committee. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate being invited. And Brian, wherever you are, it's really appropriate that we're here at the EMC facility because the electrification of rural Georgia and rural America was really one of the big milestones and catalysts for the development of the modern poultry industry. And so having a stable and dependable supply of electricity on our farms and our hatcheries and feed mills and processing plants is critically important. I wanted to give an overview of our industry and focus today on the farms themselves, the size of our farms, where they're located, the characteristics of a typical small family poultry farm. So that might provide some insights into the things that are important to preserve the farming, poultry farming as a way of life in Georgia. And Senator Goodman, I think, alluded to financial viability really is one of the most important factors in that. I'm going to touch on just the general economic conditions in our industry and a little bit about trade, which is so important to our industry, and then touch on some challenges that are facing our industry, especially in the animal health area, avian influenza that impacts trade and other things. So just as a snapshot of the poultry industry, sometimes there are misconceptions about how we're organized and how the farms are established and the size of the farm. Sometimes it's described unfairly and inaccurately as corporate farming or factory farming. That's nothing could be further from the truth. There are around 3,200 small family poultry farms in Georgia. That's broken down. When you're riding through the countryside and you see a poultry farm, you might think they're all the same, but they're not. There are basically on the broiler side of things, there's 3 different kinds of farms. There's a broiler farm that raises the chickens that are processed for meat production, like at Fieldale. Then there are breeder farms, which are raising basically these are the parents of the broilers are raising fertilized hatching eggs that are hatched to become the broilers that are processed. And then there are pullet farms. These are the farms where those breeders get their head start and then are moved to the breeder farms, and then the broilers are later produced. So 3,200 farms, and typically these are small family farms. The owners of the farms typically live on the farm itself or nearby. They provide most of the labor for the farm itself. They also might have a part-time or another full-time person, but it's very common for the small farm family to provide the labor for the farm. And it's all over Georgia. You think about this being a North Georgia industry, but it really did grow up here. And this is where a lot of our production is. In fact, if you draw a line basically from I-20 across, north of that line if you call that North Georgia, about 72% of poultry production is in that area. The rest of the state is the rest of that, 28%. But if that were a state, if you call that Middle and South Georgia, if that were a state unto itself, it would still be in the top 10 of poultry production in the United States. So very significant production throughout the state. In fact, 108 of our 159 counties have commercial poultry farming in it. There are our farms in North Georgia typically are diversified in that they also commonly have beef cattle operations on them, very common. And in South Georgia, that's a little less common, but still there are some connections with row crop farming down in South Georgia as well. The typical size of the average size of a broiler farm in Georgia is about 4.7 houses. So again, this kind of contradicts the idea, the narrative you hear sometimes about large corporate farms. Now, certainly there are some that are bigger, some that are smaller, but the average is 4.7 broiler houses. Now, moving on to production. We produce about 5 million, process about 5 million broilers per day in the state of Georgia. And that translates to an annual production of about 1.3 billion chickens, which is about 8 billion pounds. Georgia is the leading broiler producing state in the nation. We produce more broilers than any other state in the nation. And this is done, again, throughout Georgia. But there are 18 complexes in Georgia. In poultry industry, we call a complex the processing plant, the feed mill, and the hatchery, and then all of the contract poultry, small poultry farms in the region, 4 or 5 county regions commonly. So one of those processing plants would produce, on average, process about 250,000 birds per day. So that could be 2 to 3 farms, depending on the farms that are going to that single location, processing plant location. And again, there are 18 of those throughout the state of Georgia. Wherever there's a processing plant, it's typically going to be the largest employer in the area and one of the largest taxpayers. And then the farms all around 100 to 150 farms or up to 200 farms around that processing plant depend on that processing capacity as well. Also, it's going to be your largest ratepayer when it comes to water and sewer. If they are tapped into the local utilities. Now let's talk about growth over the years. Poultry industry is very different than row crop and other types of farming in that a farmer that's planting corn or soybeans or cotton or peanuts can make a decision each year on how many acres they're going to plant in for one commodity or another. It's not the case with poultry. So you have the infrastructure in the buildings, and you're going to be producing poultry on that farm every year. Row crop farming is also impacted by weather. You can have a bumper crop, or you can have a hurricane that impacts, or drought that impacts your production. So you see more variability in production in row crop farming than you do with poultry. In poultry, when we have a growth year, and I'm talking nationally now, not at the complex level, you're talking about 1% growth as a nation or 2% growth. That adds up. It sounds like a small amount, but it really adds up. If you look back to the year 2010, the Georgia poultry industry has grown by 20%. If you go back to the year 2000, we've grown by 35%. If you go back to 1990, we've more than doubled, 116%. So that 1, 2, 3% growth is steady, and over time you can see the tremendous growth that can happen when you look back at it. Financial conditions, poultry is like many other segments of agriculture. It's cyclical, and there are times when the poultry companies are profitable, and then there are times when they're not profitable. Last year was a very unfavorable year for the poultry industry. A lot of factors that were related to that, supply and demand, exports, which I'll get into a little bit more in a minute, and then input cost. Like all businesses, our labor costs have gone up, energy, equipment, and then commodity prices. And in this case, in some ways, when other sectors of agriculture are suffering with commodity prices, it can have some beneficial impacts on our side. Right now, corn and soybean prices are lower historically, and that is our number one input cost when it comes to the raising of chickens. Looking at trade, trade is very important to our industry. Look back in the year, say 30 years ago, early 1990s, we only exported about 6% of the chicken that we produce nationally. Now that has gotten up to 20% within the last 5 years or so. We're now around 17%. And that is a significant increase in percentage, but keep in mind, I also said that we've doubled in size since 1990. And in the early years, we really were dependent on 2 or 3 countries, Russia, China, and now we don't send any chicken to Russia. We are in Georgia banned. China has banned us right now because of avian influenza incident in Georgia in last fall. But we're in a much healthier place when it comes to exports, in that we don't depend on 1 country or 2 countries like we used to. Much more favorable place. So right now we're exporting about 17% of what we produce. It's down slightly because of avian influenza. When there is a detection in any state of avian influenza, our trade is disrupted. And in Georgia, we've a little superstitious. I probably shouldn't say this, but just to be clear with you, the state of Georgia has never had a commercial case of highly pathogenic avian influenza. That's avian influenza that's circulating in the United States right now. But there was a case on a small duck farm. This was a raised for release type operation down in South Georgia last fall. And we had, because it's considered by international rules, a commercial poultry operation, we lost our exports just as if it were in a broiler farm here in North Georgia. So that's affecting our exports nationally. But exports are very important to us. If you look at the per capita consumption of chicken in the United States, we're right at 100 pounds per person per year annually. And that's up very significantly over the years. But, you have to ask yourself, how much more can a person eat? That may be, I think it'll grow more, but our growth is really not going to come from, it'll come from population growth, economic growth in the United States. But our real potential for growth is exports. If you look at worldwide, people worldwide only eat 35, 36 pounds of chicken per person per year. And that's a combination of developed and lesser developed countries. Poultry within the last few years passed pork as the #1 consumed protein in the world. And I don't think that's going to change going forward because of a number of advantages that poultry has. Quickly, just talk about avian influenza. We're in the outbreak now is defined as beginning in 2002. We had an outbreak around 2015, and then it slowed for a while. We have this new outbreak in 2002 began. 48 states have been affected. 508 commercial flocks, and then 664 backyard flocks. It has impacted over 100 million chickens that have been lost because of this. And it has had a tremendous impact not only on our exports themselves, but just financial impact on the poultry industry, estimated at over $524 million of export loss, and then $1.23 billion in value loss. So when exports are shut down, domestic supply goes up, and your value of your poultry can go down. So that's $1.76 billion total, which doesn't include the cost of response. So with AI, we have this is one of the things that I think creates a good business environment in Georgia. We have a really good partnership with our state agencies, the Georgia Department of Agriculture. The Georgia General Assembly has been very supportive of our lab infrastructure, which monitors and responds to avian influenza and other animal diseases when they happen. So we have a really good, on the animal health side, our partnerships with industry and government, and our infrastructure and the capabilities to monitor the health of our flocks is really good. And that's appreciated. I'll just close with saying, I think the future is bright. As I mentioned, in the United States, we eat 100 pounds of chicken per person per year. The rest of the world is much less. So I think that shows where our growth potential is. And then when you look at just the amount of resources it takes to produce a pound of chicken, this is where the poultry industry has some built-in advantages. It takes less corn and soybeans and other resources to produce a pound of chicken, just because of the nature of the chicken itself. Less than 2 pounds of feed produces 1 pound of chicken. So I think going forward, we have the future is bright throughout the world and here in Georgia, and appreciate the committee for considering these things. As I said earlier, the financial viability of small family farms, I believe, is one of the most critical factors to preserving the farming way of life. And in Georgia, the legislature has done an outstanding job with tax advantages that make our poultry farmers competitive with other states and other producers throughout the world, reasonable regulations, environmental regulations, and then building that infrastructure that protects us at the university systems and also the poultry lab. So I'll close with that and be glad to answer any questions you have. And thank you again for allowing us to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike, for being here. You mentioned the average size was about 4.7 houses. If you had to guess, what would be the average land area in acres, or we would be talking for an average?
I don't know but I do know that you could, as compared to other types of farming operations, you can have a farm that's 50 acres. And so you can have a smaller farm, but there are 100, 200 acre farms as well. Especially when you have the combination with cattle operations, because you have the pastures that are there as well. So.
One more quick one, just
Yes,
out of
sir.
curiosity, what limits export growth potential for the poultry industry?
The world economy, also, as countries develop and go from undeveloped and third world countries to more developed, one of the first things that consumers do, when you're living on $2 or $3 a day, then to have more economic opportunities, you move from a cereal-based diet to one that adds protein into it. And poultry, as being a good value throughout the world, is one of the first things. So I think the development of the world economy, and then frankly, trade restrictions that have nothing to do with phytosanitary or animal health. A lot of times poultry gets caught up, and agriculture in general gets caught up in trade disputes that have nothing to do with the issue that they say it is. So free trade, fair trade, and then the world economy, I think, are the two things. And I think we'll compete well. Brazil is the other major exporter, strong competitor, but I think we'll compete well with any poultry producer and country in the world, if there's a fair playing field.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, you're fine.
Yeah. What is what's it costing now to put in a chicken house?
It depends on the house. There are different kinds. The larger houses can be $400,000 and $500,000. And then a little bit less than that for some of those slightly smaller houses. But to put in a 4-house broiler farm, depending on the size and whether or not you have to buy the land, it could be a $2 million investment.
So I've got one more question. Down in my part of the world, we had a poultry plant shut down. I was just curious, has there been any other states where, say if an integrator comes into an area and they're going to build a processing plant, and say, 30 or 40 farmers put their family land up for collateral and build chicken houses, and everything rocks along fine, and then 10 years down the line, the plant decides to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to, sell it, that they don't. Has there ever been any legislation across the country where, in situations like that, where the states have required or done something to where those folks, where the farmers aren't left holding the bag, kind of thing, where they have to sell the plant back to the farm to the farmers? Or
Unfortunately, in Georgia, we haven't had that happen, but I'm not aware of any legislation. There have been some situations where there have been some co-ops established. I think when a plant was going to be closed down, there was a co-op established. There may have been some state support with that. But in Georgia, we haven't had that situation happen. We did have in southeast Georgia about 15 years ago, we had a plant that suspended operations for about a year. This was in Douglas. Those of you from down, that was a Pilgrim's plant, now operating, going strong again. But I can look into that, but I'm not aware of any legislation like that.
one more question, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if you don't mind. When I noticed one of the largest poultry companies in the country posted rather significant loss this year.
Mm-hmm.
The farmers that they're contracted with, are those, because I'm not a chicken farmer, so does the farmer, are they contracted at a certain price and then it's on the?
Yeah, that's a good question. The contract system is really designed to insulate the farmer from market volatility. In other words, when the poultry company under contract provides to the grower the feed, the vaccines and medicines, and then the baby chick. And so if we're all farming and I take my chickens to market when the price is good, and you take your chickens a month later and the price is bad, worse, we're paid the same thing. So that's what insulates the grower from the market volatility. So,
Thank you.
One question.
yes, sir.
What is the gate value of poultry? Where does poultry rank? I know it's pretty close to the top. But where's the, what's the gate?
Abbott would be very upset. You know, most of y'all know Abbott passed away this year. Abbott would be very upset that I didn't mention that in my very first line. Yeah, Abbott. Yeah. Poultry is number one in terms of farm gate value. We have about a $40 billion economic impact on the state directly and indirectly annually. And about 150,000 jobs in Georgia depend on poultry industry, either directly or indirectly. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. You know, one of the byproducts that I'm sure, I don't know whether y'all, but we use a lot in our area is the manure. I don't know, do you use it, Russ?
No, sir, but that's why you see a lot of chicken farmers have cows because
That's right. Well, you know, one time they couldn't give the stuff away, and now it's they sell it. It's a big byproduct. Thank you, Mike. The next speaker is Mr. Adam Bellflower, Government Affairs Specialist at Georgia Farm Bureau.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank y'all for having me. My name is Adam Bellflower, and I do work with Farm Bureau. A little bit about us. We are the largest general farm organization in the state of Georgia. We have about 235,000 members statewide that we represent. We have 159 county offices in the state. We cover every county except Chattahoochee County, south of Columbus. There's a big Air Force base there, and we have 2 offices in Fulton County. So we have a presence all across the state of Georgia. And one of the unique things about Farm Bureau, my favorite thing about Farm Bureau, we represent specifically farmers and producers. So the focus of our organization are the people at the farm, on the farm level. And we shape all of our policies. Our policies are shaped by those members to reflect their needs on the farm. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me. And kind of the way that I'm going to start this morning is giving just a little bit of a picture of some of the challenges that farmers are facing right now. I appreciate Mike giving a very in-depth analysis of the poultry industry, and poultry is a significant portion of the ag industry in Georgia, and significant to this area geographically. So I think it was very fitting. Mike mentioned $40 billion. The state farm gate value, direct, indirect, is about $84 billion. It is the state's #1 industry, but it's funny to compare how large poultry, I mean, that's almost half the pie when you think about ag in Georgia. But just some of the things that are going on right now, some of the challenges that farmers are facing, and a lot of these aren't new. The first one I'll mention is weather. It doesn't matter how good prices are or how high input costs are. Every year a farmer is going to battle weather. And that's a very unique thing compared to other industries, compared to other manufacturing industries where people are trying to produce some output or some good. Even looking at this year, we had a kind of a cool spring that pushed off plant dates a little bit for a lot of your big row crop guys. And then you get a really wet May, abnormally wet May, historically wet May, a historically dry June, a historically wet July, and then you get a tropical storm come and hit really hard on the south part of the state. Think last year with the peach crop, you have a freeze, and in 3 days, 90% of the crop's gone. There's no other producer of any other good really faces that kind of uncertainty in producing their products. Another challenge that farmers are facing right now, and it's kind of already been mentioned, commodity prices are not very good on most commodities around the state right now, particularly a lot of your major row crops. The price is struggling to even get to that break even point. I was talking to a few guys earlier in the week and they said, we would have to have a bumper crop to break even this year. And then that's a tough place to be, as a farmer, as a producer. Input costs are high. I think all business owners are struggling, with that right now, with inflation rates. And kind of the thing that ties all of those together, for farmers and a huge struggle is Congress is not providing a farm bill for us right now. That is one of the best ways that Congress can help farmers. And, I'm biased in saying this, but I think it's the most important piece of legislation that comes out of Congress every 5 years. And we have been operating now for 2 years on a farm bill from 2018. And you kind of wait and get to a little bit going the significance of that. There's a lot of numbers, particularly when it comes to insurance and risk management and key farm programs in the farm bill that if they don't get updated periodically, then the insurance and risk management programs don't reflect what farmers are actually feeling on the farm. You think about a farm bill that was set in 2018, reference prices and whatnot, and you think about the way inputs have gone up since 2018 and the way inflation has gone up and increased cost of production across the board since 2018, and farmers don't have anything to account for that increase in inflation. So there's a lot of challenges in the ag industry right now. There's a lot of challenges in industry right now as a whole. The thing about everything I just mentioned is, I'm not going to say impossible, but I would say it's hard for the General Assembly to pass a piece of legislation to really address those things. You can't pass a bill that changes the weather. You can't pass a bill that necessarily increases commodity price, and Congress has to pass the farm bill. However, one of the things that the General Assembly has continuously done year after year is create policies that promote agriculture and protect the industry. So that's kind of what I want to do today, being that we represent all commodities. I don't really want to just harp on one thing, but I want to look at some policies that we believe will continue to promote the success of agriculture in Georgia statewide. So some more geographically pertinent to here, but also just kind of statewide as a whole. So let's start with land use policies. I think it's very fitting talking about a committee on the preservation of farmland. The General Assembly passed the Georgia Farmland Conservation Act, establishing the Georgia Farmland Conservation Fund. That's a great tool. That's a great resource. It's a voluntary program farmers can use to protect their farmland into perpetuity. Keep that farmland in production agriculture. A very simple, I think, recommendation from this committee would be for the General Assembly to fund that, to appropriate money into that fund to allow it to be operational and give farmers the ability to utilize it. Everywhere I have went around the state of Georgia, every county farm bureau meeting I've had the opportunity to speak at, if I mention the Farmland Conservation Fund, I'm going to have at least one person come up to me afterwards and ask about it. I think there's a very big appetite statewide to take advantage of that program. And I think as many resources as the state can invest in that program, it will be taken advantage of. Another thing I think that's worth considering, this is a kind of a conversation we've been having with a lot of our colleagues, not only here in Georgia, but also nationwide, within the Farm Bureau circle, is the siting of a lot of these major development projects. If land is a finite resource, how do we prioritize putting development, because development is inevitable, and growth is a good thing, but how do we prioritize putting those in places that prioritize our productive ag land and our working ag lands? Whether that's looking at marginalized lands, whether that's looking at brownfields, land that's already had activity on it and getting kind of taken out of production. There's a few different options there, but I think that's something to consider. How do we look at doing that, and what are some policies that we can push in doing that, to do that? And another thing that I think oftentimes isn't thought of as a land use policy, but I think at its core is the Conservation Use Value Assessment Program. I know there's going to be some speakers following me. It's going to talk a little bit about CUVA. And CUVA is oftentimes first thought of as a tax program, and it is a tax program. But what CUVA does very well is it promotes smart growth. CUVA is a 10-year covenant, but it's also a 10-year easement. A landowner is committing their land to bona fide conservation use for 10 years. And if they want to sever that covenant or that easement, they have to pay a very stiff penalty, right? And so that programs like CUVA are helping our landowners make smart growth or make smart decisions with their land, because they have to consider a pretty high penalty for taking their land out of bona fide conservation use. So again, CUVA, great land use policy. And kind of shifting away from that a little bit and getting more at what Chairman Goodman and Mike both have already said this morning, looking just at policies that make farmers successful as a whole, because if they're not profitable, then they're not going to be operational, right? It's at the end of the day, it's a business decision. How can they be profitable as an entity? So a few things that I want to point out. Again, I'm going to start with two that are very specific to their region and some stuff we've been hearing a lot at Farm Bureau. I know many people in this room know the value the University of Georgia with their College of Ag and the extension services are to producers statewide. I would say extension is an invaluable resource to a lot of producers. In this area, something that we've heard a lot is the lack of a North Georgia hay specialist. I know we hear from a lot of our guys, especially again in North Georgia, the need for a hay specialist. Hay is the largest commodity by acreage. It's far from it in monetary value, but by acreage, it's over 4.3. I think it's right, 4.4 million acres of hay in the state of Georgia. And we currently have one extension specialist that's responsible for 4.4 million acres of crop. So one of the things we would encourage the General Assembly to do is to help extension out in that way. But also just investing in the extension resources UGA has. I see Chairman Goodman nodding his head. The innovation and research that comes out of UGA is incredible, but if it never gets to the farmer, it's valueless. And that's Extension's job, is to bring that research and innovation to the farm. And we think that investing in Extension is a way to invest in the producers and invest in the profitability of farmers. I think about crops like from Vidalia onions to turf grass to peanuts. UGA plays a huge role in breeding all these different varieties. And again, an invaluable resource to our producers. Another thing that's really important, and again, pertinent to this area, is private property rights. That's a fundamental belief of our organization, is protecting private property rights. And what good is your farmland if you don't have the ability to use it? And private property rights has been a big discussion in the General Assembly last year. Senator Watson was in the middle of those discussions. But private property rights was a big conversation last year. And we know from those conversations, there's people that there's opposition to the beliefs we hold in private property rights, and they want to take a lot of that value away from the landowner. We think the General Assembly did right last year, and we hope y'all will continue to protect private property rights, because without the ability of the landowner to utilize their land, what good is it? A few other things. Again, I'm going to be brief in the interest of time. On July 1st, 2025, the truck weights increase in the gross vehicle weights will fall back to 84,000 pounds due to a sunset that was put in that bill 2 years ago. That is a great example of our producers being prioritized and putting on an equal playing field with their surrounding states and surrounding competitors. I personally would think it would be silly to give our producers an advantage and to bring them up to an equal playing field with our neighbors and with our neighboring states, and then 2 years later strip them of that privilege. So this year, as that bill gets ready to sunset, I would urge y'all to consider reevaluating that measure and look into that. And again, continuing to make, I hope he takes care of us. But I would urge the General Assembly to continue to consider those things, to continue to make us economically competitive. One of the last things I'm going to say, I want to circle back to, because it is important and it's something that's been mentioned already, but is common sense tax policy. That's one of the things that I think Georgia does a very good job of. Agriculture could not make it without CUVA or GATE, the Georgia Agricultural Tax Exemption Program. Both of those policies save the bottom line of farmers. It helps them be profitable on their farms. But I also just think, I think that it's good tax policies, particularly talking about GATE. We talked about CUVA. It'll be talked about more today. But looking at GATE, I don't think it's in the best interest of our consumers to tax inputs all along the supply chain. And as a farmer is trying to grow a crop, I don't think it makes sense to continually tax inputs and then also expect the consumer to pay a tax on that product at the end. when they go to buy it off the shelf. And I think it protects consumers. It allows consumers to get things at a reasonable price. But it also protects the farmer and allows them to produce and remain profitable. So Mr. Chairman, I'm going to wrap up there. I'll feel free if y'all have any questions. I'd love to take those, and just appreciate y'all being here and let me share a little bit with y'all.
Any questions?
Just real quick, what does Georgia Farm Bureau consider the average size of a farm today now in acres? That's a good question.
The last time, we typically go by what UGA puts out with the Ag Snapshot. The last time I saw it, it was around 400 acres. The issue you run into there is there's all different size farms. I mean, when you get down in South Georgia and you talk a row crop farm, it's nothing to see a row crop farm that's anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000 acres or higher. I know we have plenty of members that farm on 10,000 acres in South Georgia. Those row crop operations obviously are going to be significantly larger than a poultry farm that, like Mike said, 50 acres can be adequate for a poultry farm. So I think it depends the commodity. But I think you really see it in all sizes. So.
Great job. Speaking of hay farmers, we have any hay farmers in here? You have armyworm problems this year? Yeah, we had them too at our farm. They wiped out a whole hay field. It's just a matter of, seemed like just a matter of minutes. Because I don't know, armyworm's a little caterpillar. Y'all very familiar with it. And when it's almost like they just start marching. That's why they call them army. And it goes just go right on across the field. Well, thank you. Great job. Great job. Thank you, Adam. Our next presentation, now we're going to switch over to Cuba a little bit. And we're going to introduce Mr. Kenny Colson, who's Assistant Director of Local Government Services, Department of Revenue, and going to give us an overview of the Cuba program. Kenny? Y'all got this.
Yeah, that worked. Perfect. Great. Thank you, Senator Hickman. It's always an honor and a privilege to speak to any of our legislative committees. Particularly in this agricultural world, I can't help but think back to Senator Goodman's earlier comments. I heard two terms I hadn't heard since I was a kid, and that was sand lugs. So much of this generation today will never know the feeling of wet sandpaper under your armpits, and growing up cropping tobacco, we didn't pick it, we cropped it too. We didn't have the luxury of a harvester or a combine. Here was our harvesters right here. Pick a leaf, put it on your arm till you got an arm load and go put it in the sled. But yeah, brought back a lot of memories a while ago. I want to talk to y'all briefly about conservation use, property tax program. This is a super condensed version, very brief due to time. At the department, through the property tax side, local government services, we administer the property tax laws that our legislature passes. And part of that is education and training. And we train our local government services, local government officials on many of the different bills, the different programs that the legislature passes. Conservation is one of them. We have a 20-hour class to local government officials that we teach on conservation. And again, it's a full 20-hour class. So I'm going to take 20 hours and try to condense it to 20 minutes. It's not a little bit sooner. Okay, let's talk about mainly qualifying, ownership and property. That's the two things that really going to only have time to discuss today. Conservation use was passed in 1992. And believe it or not, I was a local tax assessor at the time when it passed. Actually, I was a tax appraiser back in 1984 with the old preferential 30% assessment was passed. I've been in the tax assessor's office. I worked there for 26 years in Toombs, Taplin, and Taylor counties. And then for the past 17 years, I've been at the department. So been around these programs just a little bit, but I am one of the instructors on the CUBA program to local tax officials. Let's talk about qualifying. I'm not going to read these word for word. Believe it or not, I wrote them 20 years ago almost, and I can just about tell you what they all are. But let's talk about the eligibility of property. It's up to 2,000 acres of a single person. Now, where that, and you think 2,000 acre limit? No, you can have 3 owners. They can put up to 6,000 acres in a conservation covenant. So it's 2,000 acres of each person's interest that can qualify for conservation. Primary purpose of it is going to be good faith production of agricultural or timber use. It can include subsistence farming, and don't get too technical here with terms, but subsistence, there, it doesn't have to be a cash crop. The producer can produce whatever they're growing or producing and consume it. You know, and a good example, growing up, my family, my brother-in-law, they farmed and they had a high number of pork production of hogs they would raise. They grew over 600 acres of corn and they never sold a grain of it. They ground every bit of it up in hog feed and cow feed. So subsistence farming, where you consume what you grow. Buildings on conservation property that are connected to the farming operation, they're under the value restrictions just like the land is. And it's a very comprehensive program on valuing the CUVA land. Back in 1993, they took area sales of farmland across the state into 9 ag districts, and they derived a sales study that we still do an annual study to the legislature each and every year. To this day, we still do it annually. But back in 93, they took 65% of the sales. They created a value from the income side, and then 35% from the market, and put that together and weighted those. And each year from 1993 through 2024, that 93 value has gone up 3% a year, with the exception of the moratorium when our economy went south back in 2009, 10. We had 3-year moratorium where values froze. Now those CUVA values and FLPA values, they froze also. So, you know, they got 3 years behind during that period, but over the years, there's only been a 3% change. This was voted by the voters in the state of Georgia overwhelmingly, and its purpose was to keep Georgia green. Let's protect our family farms. Let's try to help them with the property tax burden. So, and again, like we mentioned before, it has really enhanced property owners. It's helped farmers and helped landowners to honestly devote their property to agricultural use, and it inhibits urban development. We're trying to save our family farms. Okay, let's roll on. All right. Property which is eligible. There's different factors that the tax assessors have to look at to see if the property qualifies. And it's the nature of the terrain, the density of the marketable product, the usage of the land, the past usage, and the merchantability of the agricultural product. Again, these are considerations. In the past, the use or non-use, the proper care of the normal harvesting and growing practices that take place on the property. All across Georgia, we have residences on farm properties. Family farmer lives on his or her property. The residential structure and up to 2 acres of land under that structure is now excluded from conservation. And there's a good reason for that. Sometimes they may want to rent that house out. And before, that was a non-ag income and it wasn't allowed by the tax assessors. So excluding underlying land and the residential structures does allow that now. And it allows them to kind of, you know, operate maybe a non-ag business out of their homes. They can do that without it compromising the covenant anymore. So these were legislative changes over the years that have made the program, you know, more taxpayer friendly. And that land does not get the CUVA benefit, that 2 acre, up to 2 acres, whatever the minimum lot size is from zoning. But 2 acres is the maximum amount. And there's just an example of a 2 acre exclusion off of a farm. Ownership requirements. These are made for citizens. This program was designed for, you got to be a citizen. It can be an estate as long as the beneficiaries are citizens. It can be a trust as long as the beneficiaries of that trust are citizens. And then there's several other ownership options, nonprofit entities, organized hunting clubs that own property. They can qualify for conservation also. Now, family farm entities, LLCs, you know, for liability purposes, income tax planning, financial planning. A lot of times property owners will put their properties into entities, LLCs, and corporations. These qualify for conservation as long as the stockholders are within the 4th degree of civil reckoning, kin, and 80% of that income of that entity comes from agricultural use. So LLCs, corporate ownership, as long as they're family farm entities with the stockholders can qualify for CUVA. There's also, and this was a recent, just a few years ago, you could have 2 or more family farm entities that qualify individually. Let's just, for example, Smith and Jones families. Smith Family LLC, all the Smiths are kin. They grow an agricultural product. You have the Jones family over here, the Jones Family LLC. All of the Jones are kin, those stockholders. Those 2 LLCs can merge into one central LLC and qualify for CUVA as long as each of those qualify on their own. A good example would be maybe Smith grows corn for a living. The Jones LLC grow cattle. Well, I want to get better money for my corn. I want to get corn cheaper to feed our cattle. We go together and we split our profits, and both of them can benefit from that. So there are qualifications, these LLCs, where 80% of their income has to come from agricultural use. Additional rules that apply: at least 1/2 of the property has to be in a qualifying use, and the other half, the unused portion, if there is any, just cannot constitute another type of business. You can lease your property out. You can lease hunting rights. If you have a pond, you can do a pay to fish pond. That's fine. That doesn't disqualify it. What you can't do under the current legislation, under the current version of the statute, is you can't lease it to a non-qualifying property owner. Now, I own a farm and I want to lease it to the Jones family. They're farmers. That's fine. I own a timber tract. I want to lease it to a corporate timber company. I cannot do that under conservation because the timber company wouldn't be a qualifying owner for CUVA. Wildlife habitat is okay. Former governor, Secretary of State Sonny Perdue was real big on agritourism, promoting it very, very highly. Agritourism is an enhancement, and it is something that does not disqualify the property from conservation use. Less than 10 acres can qualify for CUVA. And if they have less than 10 acres, they must submit additional documentation, such as I have poultry houses on my property. You know, if I have an 8 acre tract with poultry house on it, that's definitely agricultural use. If I have 8 acres in hayfield and it joins my 100 acre hayfield, I have 108 acres in hay, that qualifies as CUVA. But they do require additional documentation. And the purpose of that is to prevent the urban influence, the urban tracts from claiming the exemption that the farmers get. They can lease up to 6 acres for a cell tower site. That does not breach the covenant with penalty. They would just remove that land and it would be taxed separately as a piece of commercial property, but it doesn't breach and penalize the property owner if they do that under CUVA. I've already discussed that and uncovered that. Again, I remember these slides from heart, so I can kind of tell you what they say. If a property owner applies for conservation, there's restrictive covenant on that property, preventing the use that they're seeking, then it doesn't qualify. In other words, I'm a poultry farmer. I want to apply for conservation, but there's restrictive covenant by the former owner of that land that I can't produce poultry on that land for so many years. I can't get CUVA for that purpose, as long as that restrictive covenant is in place. Don't see a lot of that, but it can happen, particularly where you're starting to get an infringement of urban neighborhood lands. A lot of the urban people don't like the ag activities, so a lot of times you'll see some of the restrictions in place. The agricultural uses, the primary uses are raising, harvesting, storing crops, feeding, breeding, managing livestock or poultry, raising plants, fowl, wildlife habitat, fishing. You can have a fish pond, like I say, that doesn't disqualify. Horticulture, dairy, livestock, apiary, you can have honeybees, beehives on your property, that doesn't disqualify. Those are qualifying uses. And something significant our legislature passed a few years ago was this bullet right here. Tax assessors used to they would be kind of strict with timberland owners. They said, okay, if you're going to grow timber, you got to harvest it. You got to sell it. Well, you can read this sentence right here, and it says they can grow timber for registration or conservation purposes rather than financial gain. That took out the requirement to cut your timber. I mean, I don't have to cut my timber. All I need to do under conservation is grow it. So they don't have to cut it. And again, they were back years ago, they were penalizing a lot of the property owners for not having a timber management plan and harvesting their timber. So that's been taken out. Conservation is a 10-year covenant. It begins on January 1, the year they apply, and it ends December 31, 10 years later. There's a 2,000 acre limit, as I've already mentioned, of each person's single interest. And it can be in multiple counties, multiple parcels. It doesn't matter. It's a statewide limit of 2,000 acres. One of the most overlooked, and this is probably, I feel like one of the most important slides I'll show y'all today. One of the most overlooked provisions in conservation use is the residential transitional. Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. I meant to point it with the laser. In this picture right here, and I know this is small and you can't hardly tell, it's very general, but you know, this original photograph on the right, let's just say it was an original family farm. And over the years, the farmers who still live in the woodland tract in the middle of this property, over the years, they've retired, they've quit farming, they sold the southern half of their property and sold the northern half of their property. And as that property sold, developers created subdivisions. Again, if it was in CUVA, that would have probably been a breach with penalty because they promised to keep it in ag use. But the old family farm house is right here in the middle of this tract. So they sold down here, they've sold up here. Well, as this property sells, I'm going to tell you right now, your tax assessor is going to be obligated, and by law, they're going to be required to value this property here accordingly. So the year that property value goes way up due to this development around it. Again, it's an old family farmhouse. It's still an old woodland tract of agricultural use. That property owner can file for what they call conservation residential transitional. The year that the value spikes upward because of this urban development, they can receive an agricultural value on that house and that land up to 5 acres. And what the tax assessor would be required to do is find a comparable sale down the road away from that development where that factory isn't in place, or find a comparable farmhouse down the road that hadn't sold and value this property right here comparable to that one down the road. And that, again, that's one of the most overlooked provisions in conservation that I've witnessed in my 40 years of property tax administration. Very overlooked, but it's in place and it's been there for several years. but it's called residential transitional. Subsequently acquired, I have an existing covenant. I'm gonna go into the next slide that shows you a little simple little illustration. I have an original covenant in place, and I acquire a piece of property straight across the road from it, or that touches it. This little addition piece that I've acquired is not in a covenant at all. I can add it to my existing covenant under subsequently acquired. The year after I purchase it, I can go in and file for a subsequently acquired covenant where both of these can receive conservation use. Now, under subsequently acquired, if my original tract, let's just say it's in a 2018 covenant, it's going to expire in 2027, right? So in 2024, I buy a little bitty piece beside it. I can add that 2018 covenant to that little small piece so that they both expire at the same time, and then I can combine them into one tract and get one tax bill with one CUVA renewal at the end of that period. That's become very, very, very popular. Do they have to touch? No, sir. There is a definition in the statute, and I took it out because we had to condense this down. It talks about contiguous. If there's a railroad, a natural boundary, a stream, a highway, a landlocked line, a county line separating the property, that property owner has a one-time provision to declare that land contiguous. Now, if it's down the road, you got common other ownership between them, that does not apply. Only a natural boundary can be between your original tract and the piece that you purchased, such as a highway, railroad, stream, something like that. And it has to be less than 50 acres for this to happen. When do they apply? When can you apply for conservation? The normal return period between January 1 and April 1 of each year. All right, each year, your tax assessor is going to mail out that dreaded notice of assessment, giving you 45 days to file an appeal. While that original 45-day notice is out, the window to apply for conservation use is there also. So they can apply between January 1 and April 1, and they can also apply during the 45-day period that the assessment notice is out. If there's a potential breach of a covenant where something has happened, the landowner has done something to alter their covenant agreement, the tax assessor by law must send a 30-day notice of their intent to breach it. And that landowner gets a 30-day window to cease and desist whatever they're doing that causes the breach, or to correct or remediate the problem that caused the breach. Good example, I'm doing a mud bogging on there and I'm selling tickets. Well, there's provisions in the CUVA statute that I can't do anything that contributes to erosion. And y'all know Georgia rednecks, mud boggings are very popular. We had a large 2,000 acre mud park 5 miles from my house in Taylor County called the Taylor County Boondocks. And I could not believe the tens of thousands of people that would come to that mud hole and play. But that's something that's not allowed in conservation use. We forget what we do from year to year. I can't remember what I do from day to day sometimes. I sign a tax program. All I know was it was a program to leave it in agricultural use and it reduces my taxes. Well, 5 years into my covenant, my neighbor down the road wants to buy 6 acres to build in my house on. I forget about the program. I deed them 6 acres. Well, along comes my tax assessor and says, wait a minute, that's not an agricultural use. You're developing the property. You're doing what you promised not to do. We're going to penalize you twice the savings per year for the last 10 years or how many years you've been in the covenant. I have a 30-day window to undo that. And in my 30 days, if I can get that property owner to deed that property back to me, I can give that to my tax assessor within 30 days, say, hey, I've remediated, I've corrected it. I forgot I was in the program. I want to put my 5 acres or 6 acres I deeded away. I want to put it back. Here's my deed back into my name. They can do that. If a tax assessor appeals, does a breach, they execute a breach and the taxpayer disagrees with it. Under 485311, just like any other property tax appeal, a breach penalty is a penalty of a tax. And before I'm forced to pay any tax, I have the right to appeal that to the Board of Equalization, arbitration, or right on up to Superior Court if I need to. So anytime a property owner gets a breach penalty from a local tax assessor's office, they have the right to appeal it if they can't remediate it, or if they feel like it's not a breach, or they have corrected the problem, they have appeal rights. So make sure that you're aware of that, you know, as long as you do it within that 30-day window or 45-day window, according to the assessment notice, you have the right to file an appeal. The breach, a normal breach is twice the savings of taxes, all the way back to the first year. An example of that would be the example I just provided. I sell all or part of it to a non-qualifying owner or for a non-qualifying use. I sell my property to a developer who's going to make a subdivision out of it. We're doing what we promised not to do. We promised to keep it in agricultural use for 10 years. That breach is applicable to the entire tract that was under the original covenant. And again, a conservation breach penalty is the courts have found it's a payment of a tax. It's a repayment of a tax back. So if somebody doesn't pay their breach penalty and they refuse to pay it, the tax commissioner can jump on that just like any other unpaid tax bill. So be careful there. All right, there are other breaches. There are breaches where there is no penalty. You know, in good faith, I signed up for conservation use for 10 years. Well, our good old DOT comes through there widening the highway and they required part of the right of way. That's out of my control as a landowner. You know, they have eminent domain authority, so they can condemn it if I don't agree to sell it to them. That's out of my control. I shouldn't be penalized for that. So the covenant went in with no penalty. DOT does their thing. They acquire and get the right of way. We do the right of way deeds and sign them. I can come back in the following year and sign my property right back in that I have left for a brand new conservation covenant where I have paid no penalty. And by all means, death of an owner who was a party to the covenant. You know, I paid taxes all my life. I die. Now they're going to penalize me for having it in the covenant. There's a provision there. If a property owner dies, it breaches with no penalty. We recommend to the tax assessors, if the owner dies, notify the heirs, hey, y'all were in a covenant. This person has died. We're going to end the covenant this year. If the heirs want to put it back in a new covenant next year and continue to get the tax savings, fine. But if you're anticipating selling the property because of the death, you're free and clear out of the covenant. You can sell it. But if a breach penalty is applied without that covenant ending, without penalty, they're going to go back to the first year of the tax savings. And there's no way you're going to get out of, there's no way you're going to circumvent penalizing the property owner for dying. So that's the reason for that provision in there. If a property owner dies, the covenant should end with no penalty automatically. You can, and there again, this is condensed down, y'all, but there's a provision. I'm in a covenant. I can sell up to 5 acres to somebody kin to me, my brother, my sister, my child, my parents. If they want to, I have a son, graduated from high school, graduated from college. He's going to farm with me. He wants to live on the farm. You can deed up to 5 acres to anybody within the 4th degree of civil reckoning, provided they build a house on the property. They start it within 2 years. I start it within a year and then finish it within 2 years afterward. That does not breach the covenant. That land is just removed from the parent parcel and taxed accordingly. Mineral exploration, allowing part of the property to lie fallow. Their set aside programs, they're still in place every now and then. Transferring up to 25 acres to a church, charity, Boy Scouts, whatever. Solar panels, you erect solar panels on your property. It doesn't breach the entire original covenant. Agritourism, cell tower installation, all of these things do not necessarily breach the entire tract. In solar panels, and I'll briefly touch this. I have 100 acres. I put 20 acres of it under solar panels. The 20 acres breaches were current year savings only. My remaining 80 acres stays in the original covenant. I don't have to pay any penalties on it. There's a current year savings breach penalty of different situations: foreclosure, a medical illness, a property owner diagnosed with a terminally ill disease. You know, they in good faith, they didn't have no idea what the health was gonna do when they signed up. So they can come out of the covenant with current year savings. There's some age provisions. I'm 65 years old. I'm in the third year of renewal. So I'm in the third year of renewal. I've had 13 straight years of Cuba. I turned 65. I can come out with current year savings as the penalty. And again, a lot of people get stuck on current year savings as the penalty. Well, it's just coming out of Cuba and being taxed at a normal rate. Is basically what that means. I turned 67. I've owned it for 15 years. I'm at least 3 years into a covenant. I can come out due to my age. They do have to make that request in writing to the tax assessors. Property has to be identified separately on the tax digest and coded as conservation use. The covenants have to be recorded in the clerk's office. They're subject to open records, so anybody can get a copy of a conservation covenant card from either the tax assessor's office, or you can go to the clerk's authority. They're recorded in the deed records. Why? Attorneys doing title searches. They need to, if they're going to certify the title, they need to be aware of that recorded covenants in place. There's a requirement by Department of Revenue to keep a statewide registry of all properties in covenants. And it's under conservation and FLPA, which is the Forest Land Protection Act, which are 200 acres or more. We're required to keep that registry, and that helps monitor the 2,000 acre limit in Cuba. That's different things are on there. And this is probably one of my favorite slides here. 48.530, it's not even in the Cuba statute, but if there's any member, any property owner in the state of Georgia that owns property and they're serving in the military and they're out of this country, there's a 6-month window for them to apply or renew a conservation or preferential covenant within 6 months of their return back to the continental United States. Back when I was a tax appraiser, that 6 months would never, ever expire. That was my call. But whether it was right or wrong, if a veteran coming in and they've been outside the country, I don't care how long it was, I let them sign. If I ever had a wish list, I wish our legislature would add 48.57.7 to that statute, to add the FLPA landowners to that too. But it's not there. All right. Any questions?
Any questions from committee? Mr. Watson?
Oh, got a lot of questions, but I'll
No.
try to be quick. First of all, on the 2,000 acre, just explain that to me again. You said it could be 3 owners, 6,000 acres.
That's gonna be my question too.
How does that?
If you, Senator Hickman, and I were on a deed, 1/3 interest each, all 3 of us are on the deed. There's 2,000 acres of each interest. So we could put 6,000 of our jointly owned property in conservation.
What if one of us needs to borrow money against that piece of property?
Well,
More farming.
I don't see where a security deed would really compromise it.
Okay, and I know this was passed in 1992. Do you think that's a number that maybe needs to be looked at?
Well, yeah, it was passed in 92, then they redid it in 93. Back in 92, and again, this goes back to my history of Cuba. Back in 92, you had pasture land, ag land, and woodland. You had 3 classes of property. In 93, it got rewritten. Now there's just ag land and woodland. But yes, sir, it's been there. It's been in place since 93.
See where I'm going. I mean, that's a small number in today's world, and I feel like we're penalizing an individual that wants to own more than 2,000 acres of land, which, you know, this committee is about trying to preserve land. And right now, if you own more than 2,000, you're penalized.
That's right.
By the state.
And we've seen legislation come and die out, you know, not make it, but absolutely. But the 2,000 acre limit used to be a lot more strict. It used to be it used to be the 3 of us on 2,000 acres, we're limited out on the 2,000. But a court case, I think it might have been out of Effingham County years ago, broke it down to per interest. So as an individual, I put 2,000 acres in it. So if the 3 of us own it, we each got 2,000 acres now, which is 6. But you're right. A particular family owns a piece of property. They have to put everybody on the deed if that farm is of any significant size.
Can I ask a question on that and then come back to you? Let's take that family farm and let's say you set up an LLC. Let's say that family, that LLC has got 10,000 acres in it. And the LLC is owned by the husband, the wife, and the 4 children. Okay, that's six people.
That's right.
2,000 each. So would that whole 10,000 acres
Absolutely.
be exempted?
If they don't have it in existing covenants in their own names personally. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, if it's an LLC, the percentage of stock, that trickles right on down to 2,000 acres each. In other words, if I'm a 40% stockholder in a 2,000 acre tract, my portion of it, 40% of that stock ownership, I'll get 40% out of that 2,000 acre limit also. So the same percentage trickles down.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about it.
Okay, sure.
Another
Senator
follow-up.
Watson.
The LLCs, you said that the Jones and the Smiths could form together and be in an LLC and still be within.
As long as they merged.
They merge. Okay, so if an LLC leases land to farm it, are they in breach? Is the landowner in breach?
If that LLC is a qualifying owner themselves, qualified to own Cuba themselves, they can lease land from another property owner.
The Smiths and the Jones are farming together in an LLC and they lease land from another individual owner.
Yes.
Are they okay?
Now, 2 LLCs that have not merged under the current statute, they're not qualifying owners, which is kind of weird, given the language was added merging them. But if you have 2 different LLCs on a deed, Smith LLC and Jones LLC on the deed as co-owners of a piece of property, under the current statute, they don't qualify unless they merge into a Smith Jones or something LLC, a merger.
So we have situations where 2 family farms are farming together in an LLC and they go out and lease a farm from a third party and they're breaching the landowner's actual covenant.
Yes, because the 2 LLCs are not qualifying owners if they're both leasing it together.
Why is that?
The way it's written in the way the language is in the statute, the ownership language. It says an entity where these stockholders akin qualifies. It doesn't put that into plural anywhere in the statute, except for the merger of 2 or more. In other words, those 2 have to merge into one conglomerate under the current statute, the way it's written.
Because in my area, that's what we're seeing is a lot of farmers are forming LLCs, they're farming together. Family members are not wanting to farm, or the family farms getting smaller, but neighbors and friends are partnering up, forming LLC, trying to farm together, and they're trying to go lease land. And then the tax assessors are finding out about it and they're saying, no, this is a breach, which is a problem.
Senator Watson, we heard a lot of that the last couple of years from South Georgia, a lot of it in the department.
I'm just going to ask, this is kind of on the lines of what Senator Watson was saying. Down in my part of the world, Senator Watson and I both have a very good friend that's a farmer. And there's an elderly lady there, I forget what she owns, 300 or 400 acres of land, but she leases this land to 2 friends of ours that have been partners farming for 30 years. But their business, their operating company is the S Corporation. And so this elderly woman who's depending on this, income from this 300 acre farm, she gets a call and says, because she's leasing this land to them because it's an S Corporation, that she's not going to be able to participate in the CUVA program. Are you hearing a lot about that? Because the problem is if you turn your S Corp into an LLC, then it has to be done, only done by a sale, and then that's capital gains taxes,
That's right.
Can you speak on that and what we may
Well,
do?
the the biggest flaw in, if you call it a flaw, what the misqualification is, the S corporation may not have partners, stockholders that are kin within the fourth degree. It has to be a family farm corporation.
And these
So-
people are not, but they're two family farm, they're two families that own an S corporation, their kids work in the business. And you get what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Yes, sir.
we're not talking about, some mega corporation. We're talking about two families that chose to set up their business in an S corp. And now all of a sudden, the land that they're dependent on to be able to farm, that this elderly woman's dependent on for income, whose husband farmed before he died. You get what I'm,
I 100%. And under the current verbiage in the statute, it doesn't qualify. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you again, as always. An honor.
I'm like y'all, though. I had several questions that we need to talk about later. So, yeah, good. Thank you. But great discussion. Our next speaker is, Mr. Lee Hemmer with the proposed CUBA reform on lease property. Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the invitation today, and it's great to be with y'all. Talk just for a few minutes. I know I'm in between y'all and a break, so I'll be very brief. Still trying to scratch my head on the 100 pounds per chicken per year calculation. If I'm reading that right, I think that's 6,000 pounds in this room. It's pretty neat. But again, my name is Lee Hemmer. We own a small family farm down in Hall County. We raise heritage breed cattle and heritage breed hogs. And we've a few years ago applied for and obtained a covenant, and it wasn't easy. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. But as Mr. Chairman said a few minutes ago, 3 million acres, almost 3 million acres have been lost. Farmland have been lost in here recently. And to put that into perspective, that's roughly the size of Yellowstone National Park, which is 3,500 miles, and that's just farmland alone. And I would think that the green space is even more than that. That's a big area. So, as we grow, as the state grows, and it's going to continue to grow, our laws concerning this old legislation that's on the table need to be revised. It's going to be harder and harder for farmers to keep farmland. So I think it should be easier and easier for us to apply for and obtain a covenant. If you're saving land, if you're preserving green space, if you're preserving farmland, and you're good stewards of that land, it should be easy to save that in conservation use. We need to encourage, I think, we need to encourage farmers and people that have green space to preserve that green space. And in a lot of parts of the states, it's becoming harder and harder to obtain a covenant, it seems like, and that's, in a way, discouraging farmers to keep the property. And so in my situation, we have like I said, a lease, a family farm, and we've had rental houses on that farm for 100 years. The oldest house on the farm was built back in about 1850, and the newest one was built back in the 80s. So this is precursory to the covenant. Here this last time when we applied for the covenant, we released these houses, and the problem was that the income that was obtained from renting these houses was throwing off the 80% rule that Mr. Polson talked about a few minutes ago. So what we had to do is we had to take these rental houses in the 1.5 acres, survey that out, and take those off the farm, which was a very difficult task and cost about $20,000. But we did that, and we were able to obtain the covenant. So our family farm, it's been in my family since 1802. We're never going to develop it. We'll put it in probably a conservation easement at some point in time, a permanent easement. But for people like me, you know, it should be easy for us to hold and to conserve that property. And it really doesn't matter, I think, and there again, I'm not a legislator, but it shouldn't matter, you know, who owns the property or where the money comes from. If you're leasing it, if you're good stewards of the property and you're conserving it for green space or for agricultural purposes, I don't think it should matter. If, you know, if you're preserving, say 95 to 100% of your property. I know it's harder and harder for the folks, the farmers down, you know, by the new Hyundai plant close to Savannah. You know, there's just harder and harder to keep that property because it's becoming more and more valuable. So there again, I think the law needs to be rewritten and looked at, and I applaud the efforts of doing that with this group. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. All right, thank you.
Any questions, first of all?
I just got one question,
Okay.
for the gentleman, Mr. Kenny. You were talking about when you were a tax assessor that you did not, you didn't charge for veterans, right? That were deployed or whatever. Does the tax assessors, do they have any leeway individually in running their offices?
Legally, probably not. And let me clarify that. What I did back years ago, I don't know if it was legal or not, because use the word legal. I didn't deny them the ability to apply because they were out of the country. That's what I meant.
Okay, all right.
When they came back, there's a 6-month window in 48530 that while they're out of the country, they have a 6-month window after returning from service to the United
Well,
States to apply.
And my question for that is some of this stuff that's really just common sense. I just wondered if they had any leeway within their own jurisdiction of their offices in their counties.
Well, because there's no longer a quarter meal involved in the property tax bill, Department of Revenue has a lot less authority as far as on a property taxes situation. We administer property tax, yeah, but it's, you know, used to, there was a quarter meal in place. We had a lot more to say about breaches and qualifying and non-qualifying. So it's really between the taxpayer and the county now. And thank you. Again, real quickly, briefly, I missed 2 important words when I was up there a while ago. Go Dogs.
Actually, we're going to change the agenda a little bit, and we got a gentleman here today that former Representative Dover, who actually was a very, very instrumental in passing the Cuba regulation. So we're going to give him, even though he's not on the agenda, he was signed up later on, but because we're in this part of the conversation, I think it's very important for him to come forward. And you want to speak, if you would introduce yourself, tell us your background, all that, and then maybe about 5 or 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the general public. I had the privilege, and my name is Bill Dover. I served this legislative district for 10 consecutive terms. Fortunately, I was able to have the greatest tenure in the legislature from this county since 1821, the first representative. I worked on the concept of conservation use value. My wife and I sat down at the table one Sunday afternoon, and we tried to figure out a way we could start maintaining open space, help family farms remain extant. Well, after 17 years of research, hard work, especially advice from the University of Georgia, advice from the Georgia Forestry Commission, the Farm Bureau, the Georgia Conservancy, and many, many other folks. What you've seen today, Mr. King has explained in detail so well, sir. I appreciate you being so vested, but I still consider this one of the most important pieces of preservation legislation that the General Assembly has ever passed. And it, Mr. Chairman, my name's on the top of it. So I am the principal author of conservation use valuation. But we've got to continue, especially my former colleagues of the General Assembly, please don't let development interests and selfish monetary interest erode this concept because it means so much. Let me ask you a question. How many of you out there have your property in a conservation use covenant? You're welcome. You're welcome. But I just felt like it was appropriate today when I realized this committee was honoring us with their presence, that I come and represent the original concept. But I'm thankful for all opportunities I've had. And I still have a listed phone number, which is unusual anymore for local officials. But still, God bless you for being here. God bless your interest. And Mama is picking okra and tomatoes. So I better slip out if I may. Be ready to stand by and help her can. But thanks again so very much, Mr. Chairman, and all of you. God bless you and a safe trip home, and thank y'all for coming.
Thanks to Mr. Dover. Thanks for giving people a ride home when they miss the bus.
You're welcome.
Oh, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. So if you just stand up, and I'm sure some of you need to go to the restroom, please do that, but no more than 5 minutes. Thank you. let's go and get started again. If y'all would, please, sit down. Sound like you're enjoying yourself, and we appreciate that. We always like to have a good time. That worked better. That worked better. Well, thank y'all. Now we're gonna move more to the local government side of this stuff, and it's just great information. I've been watching. You sit back here, you kind of watch people's faces and all, and how they're reacting, and I haven't seen anybody asleep. So that's very important. You are paying attention. You're interested. And if you wasn't interested, you wouldn't be here today. And we thank you for that. But our next speaker is Mr. Dave Willis, the Executive Director of ACCG. And then right after that, Jim Thornton, Director of Governmental Affairs for GMA. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Wills. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of County Commissioners. So I'm here in that role, but I want to give you some background. I think that certainly Sam knows this about me, and Russ has learned this about me, but I live in Southwest Georgia. Freddie Powell Sims is my state senator. I used to be a farmer. For 25 years. I scratched my living out of the dirt, growing peanuts and corn and raising hogs, and I still live on the family farm. And we continue to own most of what my grandfather bought in the 1940s, and I've purchased some land since. So we grow mostly timber, but we've got row crop land that's leased out. And so during the wintertime and on the weekends, my fun is to get on the tractor and plow fire breaks and prescribe burns and that type of thing. So I understand how important farming and farmland and the preservation of it is to our state. But I want to tell you a story. Back when I was actively growing row crops, I went to the Peanut Farm Show down in Tifton. And this is a long time ago, and there was a congressman named Kika de la Garza. He was from Texas, and he was the keynote speaker that day, and he told a story that I haven't forgotten. He said that he once had the opportunity to go and look at a nuclear-powered submarine. And it was a brand new boat, and the commander of the boat said, "Come on, I'll take you on a tour." And during that tour, the commander asked the congressman, "How long do you think I can stay on my station?" And he said, "Well, just kind of logically thinking, nuclear powered, I guess you can stay out there for just as long as they tell you to stay." And he said, "No, sir, I can only stay as long as I have food and water for my men." And that's important for us to remember. If you think about the high agricultural tariffs that we have in Europe, that is a result of what happened in the aftermath of World War II when people were hungry. And so they wanted to protect their domestic industry. Now, I'm not promoting protection like that, but what I am saying is that agriculture is critical to this state. You've already heard the $84 billion mentioned. So my role today is to talk about the role of local governments in development and growth planning, and I'll do that. But I'll tell you that I would rather listen, because I live in rural Georgia because that's where I want to live, but I'd rather listen to a whippoorwill than an automobile any day. That's my mantra. I want to live where it's quiet. Bob White's are right next door. I've got a lot of pine trees right next, and they're good too. So anything that's natural like that is important to me. So every county is different. Some want to grow, some don't. Some are having growth that's foisted upon them. There was earlier a mention, I think, by the gentleman with Farm Bureau talking about if you take, a mega plant and drop it down somewhere and it becomes somewhat disruptive to a way of life. The chairman and I were talking early this morning about the political consequences of that over in his part of the state with Hyundai and a lot of people being upset and people getting voted out of office and those kind of things. So there's lots of things to think about here, but some counties are relatively passive. It's like, I like the rural style, like that's the way I want to keep it. And then others are actively trying to grow. And there's not a right or wrong way for any given jurisdiction. It's whatever they want. So I think the role of the legislature, at least from my perspective, is to make the tools available and let people make their own decisions while we try to work cooperatively to protect that thing that is so important to us. Because every person in this state is dependent upon what grows in rural Georgia, whether it's trees, if you're growing timber, or if you're growing peanuts or blueberries or whatever it happens to be, vegetables and sounds crops. I don't even know what all vegetables you grow. Squash, cucumbers, all of them. So we're all dependent on those things. So where do counties come into the mix? I'll get to that in just a second. where's the population growing? It's primarily north of the gnat line. I heard you talking this morning about knocking the gnats back, and it's nice to be where they're not. But if it hadn't been for gnats, I think that we would have been long ago overrun in South Georgia with Yankees. In fact, I said yesterday to the House Rural Development Council, and I'll repeat it here today, I think that when General Sherman burned Atlanta and started marching south, when he got down to Macon, he sent a scouting party ahead, and they came back and said, sir, we don't know what those little things are, but they're aggravating us all. Get out. Let's go a different direction. So they went to Savannah instead of going on down to Albany or somewhere. So 74% of the population of the state lives in just 71 counties north of the fault line or the gnat line. That's where most of the growth is taking place. If you go over up around Cartersville, Rome, back over in there, everywhere you turn a corner, something is being built. More land is going from natural use to developed use. And so there are issues like that. I grew up in Peach County, even though I live in Webster County now. I grew up in Peach County, and I used to could ride from Fort Valley over to Warner Robins, and it was peach trees and wheat fields and soybean fields. And today it's houses. It's just house after house after house. So those kind of things are continuing to develop. And we have to ask ourselves, what role are we playing, not only as a legislature, but at the state level? If you want something and you incentivize it, you normally get it. So if we're putting money on the table in the way of tax breaks, you normally get that. We've already had a presentation by Kenny about CUVA. If we want to incentivize the preservation of farmland, let's incentivize that. If we want to incentivize redevelopment of existing properties, and I think Jim's going to follow me up and talk about redevelopment infill where major infrastructure exists, we ought to do that. It's extremely expensive today to build roads and water and sewer and all of those kind of things. So why not use what we have before we start spreading out? That's the kind of way that I see things. So these pressures are coming, and zoning, which is a local matter, not a state matter, it's a local matter. Zoning is one way that counties can slow things down and create development in a logical manner. And I hope that will always remain at the local level, because local officials know better about what's good for their community than anybody else. Last week, I had the privilege of seeing our former Lieutenant Governor, Mark Taylor from Albany. And he once said to me back in 1991, when I was a brand new county commissioner, that you, as a county commissioner, have the hardest job. And this is true of local officials generally. He said they can get to you. He's talking about the citizens, whether it's a grocery store, at church, wherever it is that we were at, they can get to you because they know you, they see you. When you get into the state legislature, they don't know if you're in Atlanta or DC. They don't even understand the difference, many people. So a lot of things like that. When we think about what's going on in terms of our population growth, if you were to subtract legal and illegal immigration from the mix, it's basically flat. But the country is continuing to grow some, but Georgia itself is growing rapidly. Predicted to get another 2 million people. I think I read in the story about your first meeting, 2 million people in another 24, 25 years. Where are those folks going? More houses, more roads, more convenience stores, more, you name it, is coming if we continue at that same pace. So what are we going to do? It would seem to be a conundrum in this regard. In yesterday, speaking to the House Rural Development Committee, their focus was on how do we help the counties that have not grown, that have been losing population. Here we're talking about something that's very different. And the question then is, can we do both? Can we grow? And can we preserve? And I think the answer is yes, but we have to be smart about it. And I'm convinced that you all as a committee are going to do a good job in looking at how we do that. If the state continues to pour in incentive money, abatement of taxes and things like that to draw businesses, big business particularly, to the state, we're going to continue to get it. I hope that Jim will address this in more detail than I will, but I think there needs to be coordination between cities and counties that when they're talking about development, that needs to happen at the local level. Local city council members and county commissioners need to talk together about what makes sense. I would rather see development in what I call the regional economic hubs. So when I think about Albany, Waycross, Sandersville, Jessup, you name any jurisdiction around like that, they've already got the water and sewer. Why not develop there instead of spreading out? Your jurisdiction over there with Statesboro and Bullock County, you've seen tremendous growth because of the college. So does it make sense to do that? You said somebody offered $50,000 an acre and he turned it down. Look, over in Bartow County, the commissioner over there told me there was over 1,000 acres over there that sold for $110,000 an acre. That's what I call generational wealth. You can make your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren all wealthy, and you'll never make that kind of money farming. You'll never make it. So those kind of development pressures are going to continue, but how are we going to be smart about making sure that we preserve the largest industrial complex, if you will, which is agriculture. It's our biggest business. If we can put billions and billions of dollars into incentives to get business to come here, we can do more to help preserve agriculture. And I'll give you an example in just a moment. Kenny gave a really good explanation about Cuba, so I won't get into that in terms of trying to cover what it does. But I'll say this, what I'm about to put on the table, I would suggest to you might be at first blush a bit radical. The Cuba, which you heard the great explanations about, results according to the 2023 Property Tax Administration report by the Department of Revenue put out in January. It resulted in a tax shift of over $280 million. And that seems like a lot. But compared to the billions of abatement that we're giving to industry to come here, it's not. And so what I want to propose, and it's part of ACCG's policy and has been for quite some time, is that the legislature consider making some changes so that you make Cuba like or more like the Forest Land Protection Act program, where the state is picking up part of that burden financially. In its most radical form, it would mean that for a farmer, if you've got that land in conservation use, you basically would pay zero in taxes and the state would pick that up. You're talking about an incentive to get people to keep their land. If they're not having to be taxed on it. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to go there. I don't know that you will. I don't know that that would meet with political will to do that. But if it were to happen, it would take some of the burden off, because right now it's incredibly difficult to make money farming. My son has a good friend who is farming about 4,000 to 5,000 acres of land in South Georgia. And early this year, he started penciling it out and he couldn't make it work. And my son came to me and said, he's going to quit. And I said, what? He's going to, nah, he won't quit. Too much money invested. If you look at what cotton pickers cost, pushing towards $1 million a piece, and tractors that are 250 or 300,000, you keep adding it up, all of a sudden you got millions of that. I said, no, there's no way he'll quit. That young man quit, except he kept it cattle and his hay operation, and he sold just about everything else. And he started doing other things to make money because he knew that he was going to lose money on this crop. So there's some things I think we can do, but one is to make Cuba more like Flipper. And again, I know that sounds radical, but I'm old enough to remember when all the farm equipment was on the tax digest. And Kenny, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a constitutional amendment which got passed, which took farm equipment off the tax digest. And in my small county, Webster County, I live about 35 miles north of Albany, to give you some context. Overnight, 16% of my tax digest disappeared. Overnight. We survived. I remember when Gate came along, much more recently, but when Gate came along, I thought it was going to be a disaster for county governments and the loss of that sales tax revenue. But thankfully, you all as a legislature have done more to give us other tools, such as Marketplace Facilitator, which has been a big plus where you're taxing internet sales. Had it not been for that during the pandemic, I don't know what would have happened to state and local government budgets. It would have been a disaster. But those kind of things have come along and made it much more favorable. So here's where I'll conclude. If our population continues to grow at the same pace, we're going to continue to see the loss of a lot of land. If it slows down, then obviously we won't have as much loss. But much of the economics, and the gentleman from Farm Bureau, I think, said something to this effect, much of the economics about land ownership and keeping that in ag and timber production and purposes, much of that is beyond your control. You don't get to set commodity prices. You don't get to control passage of a farm bill. You don't set interest rates. All of those things are critically important, but you don't have a lot of control. But you do have control with things like you did with Gate. You do have control with things like you did taking farm equipment off the tax digest. And when we start looking at those things, I would ask one thing of you, please. And that is that as you think about and propose alternatives for consideration, keep in mind that local governments are under immense pressure right now. They're having difficulty hiring people. They're having difficulty paying for the services. All of those things that are getting more and more costly. They're having difficulty paying for all of that. And so the pressure is we need to raise revenue from some quarter to be able to pay for those things. And yet homeowners and everybody else is saying, don't raise my taxes. It's an age-old issue, but it has become exacerbated in the last several years as inflation has pushed against everybody. And keep in mind too, there are demographic changes which are taking place. So people like me are going to soon be in the retirement line, and there are fewer people coming behind us to fill those positions. So I think we're looking at a generational change, and we're going to have to adjust. So please don't do things that would deprive government, local governments of revenue to pay for those services. Because if you don't, one of two things is going to happen. Either tax rates are going up or services are going down. And most people don't want to see either one, and you can't have it both ways. So I promise you, sir, that we will work with your committee to the extent you wish for us to. Glad to be joined by my colleague Todd Edwards there. And now y'all all know Todd very well. So I do have one final suggestion, to returning back to what I said about General Sherman. I don't think this will meet with favor up here. It would in South Georgia perhaps, because it wouldn't make a difference. But if you all would fund research for a gnat that could survive above the fall line and import that thing up here, it would probably slow down a whole lot of growth. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions, committee?
No, I get weak.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Dave, for setting some of that up. I'm Jim Thornton. I'm the Director of Governmental Relations for the Georgia Municipal Association, joined here by one of my colleagues, Noah Rainitz, who's also with our government relations team. And I appreciate the opportunity for GMA to come on behalf of our member cities. Obviously, we represent all 536 cities across the state. And we've heard a lot today about diversity, we've heard about diversity in counties. We've heard about diversity among types of farms and the type of farming done maybe in this part of the state versus in South Georgia. And certainly there is a lot of diversity across the state with 536 cities. And we can't come here today and speak on behalf of all of them what the right solution is for the local level. But what we want to talk about today, much as Dave did, is sort of the perspective of cities and cities' role in planning for growth, planning for development. I know you heard the previous meeting from the Georgia Conservancy, and you heard about some of the lay of the land on what's been happening across the state. And certainly GMA is very active working with ACCG and our colleagues in supporting the idea of needing good growth policies and good growth projections across the state. But there is so much variation from Clarksville to Moultrie to Statesboro across the state. Every community is a little bit different. You might find it a little bit odd that think about cities and GMA in a discussion about farmland, because the vast majority of our farmland is not in the incorporated municipal area. The vast majority of the acreage is in unincorporated parts of counties. In fact, you might find it interesting to note that 9% of the total land area of Georgia is inside a city. So 536 cities, but only 9% of the total acreage across the state. But in that 9% of the land area, you will find 44% of the population, 46% of the total assessed value of property, 47% of all housing units, 74% of all apartments, multifamily housing, and 69% of all jobs. So there is definitely a distinction between the unincorporated area in the counties and their city counterparts. I want to just throw out, and Dave sort of alluded to this, one suggestion that cities have is taking advantage of those existing assets that are in cities. An initial thought would be, as we increase existing public investment in our downtowns, as we create additional investment along existing infrastructure corridors, along places where there already are water and sewer lines, there already are roads and road networks. That will be a benefit to cities, yes, but it also will reduce pressure for growth on the rest of the county and the state. The good news, and one thing that I wanted to share, the good news is the legislature already has in place a very comprehensive system of land use planning. So while the ultimate zoning decisions, land use decisions, infrastructure investment decisions may be vested with city councils and county commissions, the legislature has put in place through the Comprehensive Planning Act a system where every city and every county on a 5-year rotational basis has to engage in a comprehensive planning process. That is done under the auspices of DCA. Department of Community Affairs, but in close cooperation with our regional commissions. And we have regional commissions all over the state that work very closely with our local governments in developing that. One of the things that Dave mentioned was yesterday we were talking with the Rural Development Council, the House side of some of these issues, and they recognize that good planning is necessary both to protect farmland and protect the agricultural and timberland, but also to create growth patterns in our cities where growth is naturally occurring or may want to occur. So what I wanted to talk about just very high level today, and we can get into more detail offline, we can get in more detail in future meetings, bring in examples if that's something you would be interested in from counties or cities across the state. But is to talk about some of the tensions that exist. You've already identified those, you've heard them today. There is this tension between growth and preservation, right? We want both. And I agree with Dave, we can have both, but it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge because you're trying to figure out how you can respond to the desire for jobs and economic pressures, the retail, the commercial activity that all of our residents want, but also not encroach upon the places where some of those very products are being made, being grown, that are being offered for sale in the retail centers. There's also this tension that we hear as we go across the state between the ideal and the reality. There's an ideal model out there that sometimes says, well, there's a central city with the commercial in the downtown area, much like here in downtown Clarksville, which is a great thriving downtown just down the road. And then the growth naturally occurs out from that central city with with dense neighborhoods and then less dense neighborhoods and then out into the farmland. That's kind of an ideal. It doesn't always work that way, right? But that is something that I think our land use planners look to, and they say certain types of uses make sense in certain locations. I know you've had a lot of discussion about the Hyundai Meta plant and some of the growth pressures down there. In a prior life, I was mayor of LaGrange and on the city council in LaGrange. And so I've seen that happen on the ground with the Kia plant. What was once a 2,000 acre farmland, 2,000 acres in unincorporated Troup County farm became the Kia plant. Now, you might say, well, how did that happen? Well, it happened because in the 1970s, Interstate 85 came through Troup County and came right beside that farmland. That was really the impetus for that. That became a very valuable piece of property to all of a sudden put an industrial development on. But I'm pleased to say that in that particular instance in LaGrange, and Troup County and the other cities of Hogansville and West Point came together and recognized some of these various tensions and said, okay, growth should be occurring along existing infrastructure, where the city of Hogansville, LaGrange, and West Point, which are all basically connected now along the interstate corridor, that's where you see your retail growth. That's where you see your multifamily and your single family residential growth. And you don't see a lot of that in Southwest Troup County or Southeast Troup County or Northwest Troup County. You see much less pressure. And that was a conscious decision by the local officials in that context. They knew that county. The Board of Commissioners knew that county. The city officials knew their cities. They knew that when they need to do a comprehensive plan, they need to be realistic about where that growth is going to occur over time. Obviously, we have to be sensitive to private property rights. We have to be sensitive to the notion that people have a right, to use their property, but we also have opportunities to incentivize, as Dave said, the type of growth that we want to see. So if you're going to incentivize high density commercial industrial development, you incentivize that in large part, not through zoning, you incentivize it through where you build out infrastructure, where you place the water lines, where you place the roadways. We also know that there are a lot of limitations with this growth. So cities and counties are all different, all across the state. They have different topography. They have different, some places, up here in the mountains, you're primarily reliant upon surface water. South Georgia, it's more groundwater. I mean, everything can be different based on the local context. And those are the things that a local government official at the city and county level is in the best position to anticipate. There is also simply limited land. We know, we talk about the people moving to Georgia, and we're not growing any more land. There's a limit to that. And so we have to be intentional about what part of that land is best suited for what particular use. One thing, we talk a lot about infrastructure. We talk about the demands of water and sewer in particular. Probably the most well-known secret among city and county officials is that basically every place that's easy to sewer has already been sewered. Because the thing about sewage is it flows downhill, right? And so if you're trying to put in a sewer system and you're having to build out lift stations and pump stations and force mains, that accelerates the cost to the point that oftentimes it becomes prohibitive. But we've sewered a lot of our community, and developing along those places where we have existing water and sewer is something that our local officials are constantly taking into account. I would say that if there are limitations on the abilities of local and city and county officials right now to do comprehensive land use planning and to develop systems that make sense, that take all these factors into account, the infrastructure needs, the historic development patterns, the needs of the community, it probably is the limited staff that many of us have. Dave alluded to workforce, and planning and land use planning are very complicated. And many of our communities do have limited resources. If they're trying to make sure the water is flowing, they don't necessarily always have as much time to plan for where the next water line should be built. But fortunately, through organizations like ACCG, GMA, the regional commissions, DCA, we have a lot of resources that we can bring to bear. We don't obviously at GMA, we don't obviously write the plans for the cities, but we can assist them in writing what makes sense for their local community and connecting them to the resources, particularly through the regional commissions and other places where they have planning staff. I would also just say that one of the things we talk about, the things that cities and counties can do to spur development or to hold back development and so forth. Oftentimes, those are questions that are outside of our hands, because particularly when it comes to infrastructure planning, there is a limited capacity. I mean, cities and counties have a limited amount of water they can withdraw and treat. They have a limited amount of wastewater they can treat. There are permit limits, there's physical limits, and let's just be honest, in the last 4 years, everything that I've described that cities and counties do in relation to growth planning has become incredibly expensive. Y'all talked about that in the farming, in the agricultural context. Everything is out of sight. When you talk to a city, and you probably had some of this experience with your own cities, they go out to bid with a wastewater treatment project, and the bid comes in 50% or more higher than what their own engineers were expecting it to come in at. And the cost of running pipes in the ground, the cost of the concrete, everything is prohibitively expensive. So that's another reason why, as part of the well-planned community, developing along existing infrastructure patterns is something that probably we're going to have to move more and more to. I mentioned the comp planning process. The comp planning process every 5 years is required of every city and county. That's in order to maintain qualified local government status. You have to have an approved plan. It does involve public input. It involves input from the local community leaders, obviously involves public hearings and things of that sort. But DCA manages that process along with the regional commissions. Some of the elements that are included in those comprehensive plans, and if you haven't ever reviewed the comprehensive plan for your city or your county, it's a publicly available document, and I would encourage anyone to get a copy of that. But some of the things that it includes are the things we've been talking about: the economic development plan. What type of industries are you attracting? What type of businesses? Where do you want to grow? I mean, all of those questions are part of the comprehensive plan. And land use is a big component of that. So every one of those comprehensive plans will have a character area map, which is just a map of the community that shows the areas that are intended to be agricultural, the areas that are more retail centers, the areas for housing. Typically has a land use component to it. And agriculture is very much a part of that plan. It also, the comprehensive plan will address these infrastructure issues. The cities and the counties will come together and discuss what is the future of the build out of that local infrastructure. And that's done both through the comprehensive plan and through something that layers on top of that, which is the service delivery strategy. And I know Senator Watson, who serves on the State and Local Government Committee, but all of you as well. Heard a lot of discussion this past session about the service delivery strategy revisions. Those are historically places that cities and counties can come into conflict. And quite honestly, cities and cities can come into conflict as far as that goes. But it's a good program that follows the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan on a 10-year cycle triggers a revision of the service delivery strategy, requires the cities and the counties to come together and to have these various discussions. Who will serve water in that area? Who will serve sewer in that area? Who will provide recreation, parks, all the various services that the city and county supply? We believe, and GMA and ACCG both supported the version of HB 1407, which passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate towards the end of the session. Although it has a delayed effective date, we believe that some of the provisions of that bill, which will bring cities and counties closer together, will provide dispute resolution processes, will try to align some of those service delivery strategies in a more of a 21st century way. We think that that's going to be very helpful in allowing local officials to construct a vision, to get input from their local citizens, and then to put that vision into paper and enact it over a 10-year cycle, understanding that the world can change. The world can change very quickly. With the announcement of a major plant, such as in Bryan County or any of the other major industrial announcements we've seen, with changes in the economy during COVID and some of the implications that had, with certainly the inflationary cycle we've been in, all of these things force you to periodically review these plans. But you need a plan. You just always need to be willing to adapt to that plan and modify it if circumstances warrant. Again, I'll just echo what Dave said about the role that GMA and ACCG and our local officials play. I mean, we are ground zero for these discussions. The conversations are taking place in 159 counties across the state, with growth pressures, with the shifting in the economy, with movement to remote work and what that does for housing pressures. I think that it's going back to where I started with in terms of making investments where there's existing infrastructure, channeling resources. I think the state's already doing that. And so we certainly appreciate the investments that y'all have made in Rural Workforce Housing Fund, in the GFA funding that you've provided, in the transportation dollars. But many of those awards are going to either where there's existing infrastructure or on the edges of the city, maybe where you can build out a system much more inexpensively than building a new pipe into the middle of a green space. But I also want to say that part of the reason why y'all funded the Rural Workforce Housing Fund, which GMA and ACCG supported, and part of the reason that we're spending a lot of our time at the local level thinking about how to revise land use plans, is because we're under a lot of pressure. And we're under a lot of pressure to develop more housing and to develop more housing options. And we need that sort of pressure relief valve, if you will. We need that housing because we need places for people to live. So if you think about the example, I saw this yesterday at the House Rural Development Council. Commissioner Nunn from DCA showed a map of some land, and he showed a map that had single-family housing on septic tanks, right? And if you're talking about building a single-family development on septic tanks, you're probably talking about 2-acre lots, right? Especially if you have to drill a well and build a septic tank and hope that the land perks and that you can actually get a septic tank in. And so if you take a 2-acre example and you say somebody has 50 acres of land, and it requires 2 acres per lot, that's 25 houses. That's helpful, but that's not nearly the pressure that's not the pressure relief that if you can build that same subdivision, 50 acres, where there is water and sewer availability, and you can typically do a 1/4 acre lot. And so on a 50-acre lot, a 50-acre parcel, you can get 200 houses. That's 8 times the number of houses simply because water and sewer was available. We have to be very thoughtful about where we deploy that water and sewer. But without doing so, we're never going to be able to relieve that pressure, that growth pressure, that housing pressure. It's going to require more creativity on the local level as it relates to density. And I can report that we're hearing that from our cities, that they are supportive of developing more housing, but obviously housing that meets the needs of their particular community as well. We know how valuable farmland is. Cities and counties work closely together, most of the farmland being in the counties, but that sort of that ideal that ideal county where you have the central city and the farmland in the unincorporated area. Many of those farmers are coming into town to farmers markets. They're coming into town to shop and engage in commerce. And many of the residents of those higher density downtowns are wanting to see the farmland. They like seeing that in their community. Obviously, agritourism is something that was mentioned earlier, being a very growing business in our community. So while most of the farmland's not in the cities are very much eager to be a part of this conversation. Look forward to continuing to work with your committee, continuing to work with ACCG, and seeing how we can accomplish that goal of holding in tension growth and preservation and finding a solution that works for everybody. And I would certainly be glad to take any questions or defer to, yeah.
This may be more for later on, just sitting here thinking, Dave mentioned this, how the farmer did his budget and he decided he couldn't farm anymore. And I know for me personally, I decided not to grow cabbage this year because it just wasn't going to work on paper. But I guess for both of y'all, are local governments now to the point where when a project comes or development or growth, are y'all able to put that on paper and actually do a budget and say, okay, this is what it's going to cost us in 5 years, what's going to cost us in 10 years, what's going to cost us in 20 years, what's the sewer, what's the garbage, what's the water, what's the housing cost, what is this going to cost us in 10 years? We're going to give you this and give you this and give you this. And the state's going to do this part or whatever, but are you truly able to put that on paper and actually know that you're going to benefit from it and make money?
I'll let Dave come up and respond as well, but I would say that that is very much part of the discussion that takes place at the economic development level when a big project is coming in, to try and discuss on the city perspective, that a lot of our cities are not as reliant on property tax as a percentage of our general revenue stream. About 27% of our revenue is property tax. So certainly the abatement calculation is a big component of it, but also, we have to take into account the potential sales tax implications, utility sales, et cetera, and all of that factors in. But very much so, we think about the expense side of the house. And it's not just the cost of putting in the water or sewer line or the road today, it's the maintenance cost. Because even if, and this happens a lot of times with private development, both industrial as well as residential, even if the private developer pays to build the water line or the sewer line or the road, which oftentimes happens in some of these projects, once it's built, the city takes over responsibility for that road. It's dedicated to the city, or for that water or sewer line, it's dedicated to the city. And so that becomes two things. It becomes an ongoing maintenance issue, and it also becomes a long-term capacity issue. Things like the sewer treatment plant, the water treatment plant, not just maintaining that plant, which is bad enough, believe me, but also how you are now devoting your resources to that particular project. Because water's not an infinite resource. I mean, farmers well know that in a time of drought and so forth, water can be a very dear commodity. And so cities have to go through that same allocation. You don't want to tie up all your eggs in one basket of, the one particular project. You want to think more holistically about what is going to be the long-term implications. And
Mr. Chairman, if I ask one question?
Yeah.
Are we doing enough as a state in terms of urban renewal? I go to some of these places in my travels and, some of these cities, and they've taken, parts of cities that were run down and look bad, and they've taken these old buildings and turned them into, multifamily housing, and it's just rejuvenation. And, it just looks like the more we did of that, the less we may have people trying to move to the suburbs and take up, farmland.
Absolutely. And there's two aspects of that. One aspect is downtown revitalization, which is something that GMA has been working very closely on with DCA and through funding that the legislature provided 20 years ago or so, as well as some funding through the Woodruff Foundation. And we have had a revolving loan fund, and we've been doing projects in downtowns all across the state where trying to do exactly what you described, take a 100-year-old building in downtown and convert it to maybe first level retail or restaurant, second level apartments, or, some type of, redevelopment project. We have some great success stories. Be glad to share with those offline all across the state where that's been happening. And that certainly is a great adaptive reuse. The other component of that's a little bit more complex is on the housing side. Most of our cities have lots of housing stock that is very dated, that would not be built under a current code, probably, right? I mean, it's just a safety code, a fire code, et cetera. We have mill village housing in some of our towns that were built when the mills were booming 100 years ago. And that housing, it's great housing. In some ways, it's very well planned with sidewalks and with rear alleys and other types of amenities that we really like today. But the house itself is 100 years old and hasn't been kept up and hasn't been maintained. That is a harder thing to do. It's easier in the downtowns because with the commercial, you automatically get the income stream that you can rent out the property, you can amortize a loan, et cetera. It's more difficult when you go into those older existing neighborhoods. But yes, we absolutely have some cities that are doing that. They're doing it through code enforcement, which is kind of more of the stick approach. They're doing it through incentives and streetscapes, which is more of the carrot approach. But yeah, we definitely have a lot of interest in that and be delighted to see if there's some ways that we could strengthen that, because there are a lot of houses out there that are underutilized. And if we have housing pressure and you want to take that pressure off, getting those properties back into some type of productive, use is something that we would very much support and would like to discuss further. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. We're a few minutes behind, but that does not diminish our enthusiasm at all. Okay. Jim, I would like to thank y'all. The General Assembly has really put a lot of focus in the last couple of years on literacy and how important our children being able to read in Georgia and across the whole United States is. And the GMA and the Georgia Council on Literacy, and of course, Malcolm Mitchell, Share the Magic Foundation have now formed a collaboration or working together, making literacy a priority. Obviously, those are not the only organizations that are doing that. Rotary International in Georgia has got it as a priority. We're Baptists, and now the Georgia Baptist Association has done it. And for those of y'all in this room that don't realize, in 2019, only 43.49% of the children in Georgia in the third grade were reading on the grade level. And it's an epidemic situation. And as the governor said, we can't wait till next year on this situation. So thank the GMA for doing that. We're going to go into the public comments now. We're going to give, not because of time constraints, but we really want everybody to be able to hear Mr. Tom Crow. Is Mr. Crow still here? Yeah, okay. Without E. Crow without E is what he told me. So at the most 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, please, sir. Please.
I had a outline of what I wanted to cover today, but after listening to all of these things that's been said, I've changed a couple of things. The comprehensive plan that we have to do every year. Let me ask everybody here a question.
Go back to your background, please.
Go back to your background. Okay, I'm the chairman of the Board of Commissioners in Jackson County, a county that is growing greatly, got a farmland conversion rate that's unreal. I'm also a second generation farmer. I raise catfish there in Jefferson. Okay. And my name does not have an E on it. A lot of people try to put it on there, but I don't have one yet. But back, a question for everybody in here. Okay, you finished high school, made plans. You was going to go into military service, you're going to college, you're going to a trade school. You picked out your spouse. You made plans for how many kids you're going to have, where you're going to live, that kind of thing. What kind of job you're going to hold. Hopefully, you're going to keep the same spouse. At some point, you're going to have a certain amount of money in the bank. Now, how many of you are on track with that? Raise your hand. You mean these plans don't always follow through? That's the way these comprehensive plans that we do every 5 years. We make out some great little maps and used to just roll them up and throw them on the shelf and pull them out 5 years later. But now they do require us to look at them. But those things are just plans. We plan for this industrial park here. Hey, that man doesn't want to sell his property. You know, how are we going to make them? We don't. I do not support taking property away from anyone. But I've got a little different outlook on this thing. The cougar that we heard about today, I've got a little different remembrance. It's probably kind of like if you had some Georgia Tech people together and some Florida people together, and you ask their take on the ball game, you'd hear a lot of different answers, I'm sure. But my remembrance of Cougar, I was part of Farm Bureau back in the 80s. And during that time, the county commissioners were pushing for a lot of subdivisions. We need to bring more people into the counties to spread our tax load around. We get these houses and people in here and we're going to collect a lot of money. Well, that went on for several years, but somewhere along the line, the county commissioners realized that the houses, subdivisions were not paying their way. They still don't today. So the county commissioners went to the state legislature and said, we need some help on slowing this growth down. We did promote it before, but we want to slow it down now. And a study committee such as this was formed. They found out that the farmer at that time was being taxed like every farmer was going to build a McDonald's on their farm. And so they were being taxed off of their land. How can we prevent this? Why are these farmlands being converted? It's the taxes. How can we prevent it? CUVA was born. The CUVA was a process. The Department of Revenue was there, the Ag Department, UGA, and the Federal Land Bank. And the values that they came up with, the numbers that you see each year on if you're in the part of the CUVA, what it's worth, it's basically what a bank will loan you to buy that land, knowing that on a per acre basis, knowing that you've got to raise enough commodities on that land to make the payments. Just a simple business plan. How are you going to pay for that farmland that you buy? And that's how the CUVA values each year are set. It was then, I guess it's still that way now. But the cost of these subdivisions, even today, Jackson County had a cost of services study done recently. One of the UGA bean counters did it for us. And we found that one house on an acre of land with one child in school essentially cost us $2,000 more than they produce. You say, how did that happen? I pay $5,000 in property tax every year. Well, it cost us $7,000 to produce all of the services that are required. Mainly that schoolhouse, because that's, in most counties, it's 65 to 70% of your taxes is in school tax. Well, if that land, which is in our case, we'll we can build two houses. So if each one's costing us $2,000, that we've got to find somebody else. That means times two, we got $4,000. We got to hunt somewhere. We convert it, we can convince that farmer to convert it to a Cuba. His taxes, instead of being $100 an acre when he's being taxed off the land, now it's $10 an acre. So you as a county commissioner, do you want to try to find $4,000 here or be glad to get the $10 per acre? You know, that doesn't make, it doesn't really require a lot of thinking, you know. You want to, hey, I'm glad that that farmer is in the Cuba. We need to do everything we can to keep it there. But really, my process on this is that I'm asking you to consider an additional way of farmland preservation by this committee. When that farmer, I've signed 4 10-year covenants with this Cuba. So I'm bumping 80 years old. So this is bringing on some of my thinking now. That's because when I'm no longer able to farm, either physically or financially, I'm going to put my farm on the farm market. My kids don't want to come back to it. Now we have a regular splost, E-splost, T-splost. Maybe it's time for us to offer a self-imposed sales tax to benefit farmland preservation to be implemented, a farmland splost. The money raised could be used to buy the farms outright or used to buy the development rights, and let that farmland remain private, paying property tax and being maintained privately, but undeveloped forever. But the right for each individual county to self-impose a sales tax for farmland preservation starts with this committee. Thank you for listening to me today. I appreciate the work that you do for the state. Any questions?
I was just wondering, you grow catfish. I was just curious how many zip code 303s you got to have to keep those things called.
There's a lot of them. There are a lot. I tell people, don't turn them, put them down. Fish, drag them in.
Thank you, Ms. Crowe. Very, very good. Ms. Rebecca Williams. Okay. This lady has been so nice the whole meeting. She has been smiling. She's been attentive. She's been watching things. Her head's been going up and down. It's been going sideways some. So your turn.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for holding this meeting. I'm a Georgia born and bred. I'm glad to be here. I come with cowboy boots on. I agree, we need more boots in the legislature than wingtips. I also tell people I did not grow up in the city, but the city grew up around me. That's why I'm here today. I'm real encouraged to hear what y'all are talking about. It's scary to see all the growth coming in. It's detrimental to our country, our state, our county, our cities. It ruins everything. And I think you might be on the right track. As much as I don't like gnats, I like gnats better than the Yankees. I don't have an answer to things, but I do have a small community of a bunch of small farmers. I come from a background of beef and timber. And it's getting harder and harder just as it is to crop farm. My grandparents crop farmed and they couldn't make it. And we still have our farms, but we can't afford the taxes on them. Where I grew up, all the farms where we grew up, they're all gone. They're neighborhoods. They're strip malls, they're 4 lanes, 6 lanes, neighborhoods, all asphalt. We call them asphalt jungle. Everybody got taxed out of their land. It's a big problem. So it's encouraging here. Everybody's got pretty much the same end result. I think everybody wants to save the farmland and control the growth. I don't have an answer on how to do that. I'm here to kind of learn. I'm learning that public needs to step up a little bit more and put input in, and maybe I need to take it up on myself to go door to door to our local residents around here and try to make them aware that, you know, we do have a voice and we can help impact legislation. If more of us stood up for what we believe in, there'd be a lot more people in this room and there'd be a lot more people to come and speak today. I am encouraged about some of the tax relief. The gentleman had a good idea about trying to keep city in the city. Um, I don't know how else to do, but I'm here to learn. I'm here to try to find out what we can do as just regular farmers. As far as the poultry industry, I know, we have a lot of friends that's in the poultry industry and they're not in the poultry industry anymore because they have a 1-year contract on their houses. The ones I'm specifically talking about are, the producers, the breeding farms that he was talking about. They were approached, most of these farmers, I know them, they were approached that they said they needed $500,000 upgrades on these houses. They couldn't afford to do that. They looked at that and they penciled it in and figured out how many years it's gonna take them to pay that back. But they only get a 1-year contract. If you get a 1-year contract and ask to put $500,000 in, what's to say you're gonna be not renewed in the next year and you're out of $500,000? That's a big problem. That's a big problem with a lot of the industries I'm seeing. So thank y'all for trying to come up with resolutions for all of this, and thank y'all for having us here and trying. That's all we can ask for.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Great job. Rebecca, that's one thing I don't understand either, because even down in our area, I hear about the 1-year contracts. And of course, as someone said today, these chicken houses are $400,000 or $500,000. And I have trouble understanding how the bankers put all that in mind when they only got a 1-year contract. But they do it. The next person is Miss Karen Redding. Oh, right next door. Okay. Okay, good. Come on. I thought y'all were family.
Oh, we're neighbors. Actually, these two ladies right here are my lovely neighbors. We unfortunately are from Habersham. We live over in Mount Airy. We now are the proud owners of a farmer's estate. The family came in, they didn't want it. They decided to split it up because the money was more important to them. For us, it was more important for the farmland to be preserved. I knew the gentleman, very fond of him. I actually got into farming as a first-generation farmer because of this gentleman. So I have questions for you because I also run a farm animal rescue, a 501c3 that you were talking about, that you can't get into conservation here in Habersham, apparently. So some of the things that y'all were talking about, gate cards. As a farm, we're a small farm, we're not big, we don't have multiple acres, we've got 15 acres. We're running an animal rescue off half of it, the other half we're trying to grow crops and produce our own chickens and produce our own meat so we can financially afford to keep supporting the animals that are turned out here in Habersham or abused. Gate cards are not allowed for 501c3s. You have to sell products to get them. We've been rejected multiple times, so I beg upon y'all to please talk about this, to maybe address it, that animal rescues do deserve to get a gate card too. We're a farm animal rescue because we live in a farm community. I have 27 pigs right now that were from this county, that were from farms that people couldn't afford the feed anymore, so they were starving them to death. We're stepping in, trying to make this a better place. We can't do it without the support of gate cards. You also started talking about increasing tax rates. Part of that is short-term rentals are popping up everywhere. What can we do to maybe tax them more instead of the farmers more? Short-term rentals have been popping up because they break up the land and builders are learning how to skirt the rules. It's not against the law, but it's not for the law. It only takes 1 acre with 60 feet of road frontage in Habersham to build a house. You can build 4 consecutively before you're considered a subdivision or have to apply for a subdivision permit. We need stricter laws. They decided that it was fine to build 4 houses on one side and 2 houses on the other side, and they didn't have to pull a permit. And they just took up 30 acres of farmland doing that. So we need more help fighting these, not just on our level. We need the state to be stricter, start enforcing more. And I beg upon your mercies to think about these things, to maybe bring up gate cards to help the farmers with the feed, to crack down on the builders that are learning the gray area, that are skirting the rules. And that's really my notes from today.
Mr. George Kelichek. Okay, come on up, Ms. George. Now, we know we're gonna have to put a clock on this guy.
I only have 3 minutes at Board of Commissioners meeting, so I'm well trained. First of all, I'm bringing 3 solutions to the table today. Let me start off first. Y'all are asking 3 questions of me right now. Can you trust me? Am I committed to excellence? And do you like me as a friend? I'm going to do my best, do what's right, and treat you with the mutual respect you deserve. So here we go. I grew up on a cattle farm in Prince William County, Virginia. No cattle farms left. It's all data centers. The biggest threat we have regarding farmland in this great state is unplanned development. So I'm going to give you some solutions to this. I'm the chairperson for the Rockdale Soil Water Conservation District, which is one of 40 districts in the state of Georgia under the jurisdiction of the Georgia Soil Water Conservation Commission. I'm also the chairperson for the Upper Okmulgee Basin Area Council, which is part of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning Commission district and tied directly to the Atlanta Regional Commission. So we have 70,000 miles of waterways in this state. Water is very important. No water, no soil, no farms, no food, plain and simple. So what did we do 2.5 years ago? This started, and last April, or this past April, I was proud to announce that the Rockdale Soil Water Conservation District, in unison with one of our great sponsors, the Georgia Agribusiness Council and the Lieutenant Governor's Office, were there supporting us and speaking on behalf of over 300 careers in Georgia are tied to agribusiness. We hosted over 419 students and parents and shared all of these different careers with them. Everything from flying drones to banking to governmental affairs. This was under the auspice of House Resolution 275, which Tyler Harper came to Burt Jones a little over 2 years ago and said we had to improve the agribusiness workforce and curriculum in this great state. And this is what we did. We planned to have 10 of these across the state. Going to schools in the state of Georgia, we found out 2 things. Students did not know what bib overalls were. So I had to go to Goodwill and buy a pair. And I told them you don't have to chew and spit tobacco to be in this business. So they found that out. So that was one item. Solution number 1. Solution number 2. We've heard a lot of talk about farm worker housing, infrastructure costs today. My colleague, Greg Ramsey, who heads up villagehabitat.com, grew up in France along with his father, a professor at Georgia Tech. What has been developed and is already ongoing in Barnesville, Georgia, is a farm belt. It's a concept that's used in France. Henry Ford, from an agricultural standpoint, kind of led us down this direction. We just jump in our car and go places. Here is a plan that we can take every major city in the state, tie it out 60 miles to the farm belts, and lead to economic development in every one of our cities and counties throughout the state. It's already been done. It's being done. I've got plenty of handouts here for you. The third solution, we talked a lot about planning. I sit on a lot of planning and zoning commission meetings throughout this state and throughout the Southeast. I challenge you to think about conventional wisdom. I look at a lot of these plans. Our planners throughout this state and the Southeast do not have a concept of conservation. This is what DeKalb County has done through the auspice of Ted, one of the county commissioners there, very passionate, grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. We now have a plan in DeKalb through Ted Terry and Greg Ramsey, we know specifically what every parcel of land, what is going on with those in DeKalb County. That then gives them the vision of what they want to do with all of their other land that's still available. So we're going to champion this committee to meet with myself and several of my team to look at this for a plan for all 159 counties, because we all have a frame of reference. Some of us grew up in the projects. I grew up on a cattle farm. So to ensure that the next generation has food to live on in this state, we have to look at this and we have to challenge conventional wisdom. So I'll be back there if you want some handouts. They're here for you free of charge. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Mr. Nick Davis. Probably eating a hamburger right now. Mr. Gilbert Barnett. Okay. Is it Barnett? Barnett. Okay, good. Thank you, sir.
I'm Gilbert Barrett. I'm a farmer here in Habersham County. I've raised a grandparent primary poultry and also beef cattle operation along with hay. I also manage an agricultural cooperative that covers several Northeast Georgia counties. In addition to that, serve on Georgia Farm Bureau State Board. Also, but it's about balance. Mr. Chairman and committee, thank y'all for being here and coming to Habersham County. The reason I don't have any prepared remarks, wasn't planning on speaking today, and my wife says that's very dangerous when I get up with nothing in front of me. But I will say this, is that you came to Habersham County, and I think it's a very unique situation because it is about balance. As a member of the state DCA board, and I chair the housing committee on that. It's important that we have places for people to live. It's important for us to have a viable economic engine here in Georgia, and we do. Georgia's been the best place to grow and for business for the last 10 years. In addition to that, though, the basis and the foundation of our economic development here in this state is agriculture, just as Mr. Willis has indicated. And if we don't continue to cultivate that in this state and have relationships where we're sitting down, when I go to a community with DCA and we go and we see some communities that are getting it done, you know what the most common denominator is everybody in that community is sitting down and they're working together for the betterment of that community. In Habersham County, that's very hard because we have 7 municipalities in this one county, and to get 7 people to agree on one thing, and it is a tug of war. What I'm saying here is in Georgia, we're the #1 industry. Agriculture is the #1 industry. Agriculture is power. Food is power. And as long as we've got food, we've got power. But when we start decreasing by 2.8 million acres a year, or within the last 30 to 40 years, I see what's happening in Habersham. Then we got a problem. And it's about profitability. And believe me, I hear that all the time because I'm in ag. But it also, Habersham County, 20 years ago, we were #2 in farm gate value. So I have 159 counties. Habersham County ranked 2nd. We were #1 in 97, 98, somewhere in there. We're now 41st. And that's from in the last 23 years. So agriculture is still the #1 industry in this county. It's still very viable, but it is not where we were. And why? I was school board chair here for several years, served on school board for 8 years. And Mr. Crow, you made a very great point in that while I was school board chair here, we were growing 250 kids a year in Habersham County. That was, so what did that, we ended up with capital outlay projects of about $95 million for Little Habersham County to build facilities to house schools are. We're still paying, that was in 2008. We're still paying for those school buildings today. So it's all about balance. And we do have to have places for people to live. I am all about, it's exciting when you've got industry that's going to come in and give a medium income in Bryan County of $58,000 for people to come in and work at the Hyundai plant. But then there's 8,500 jobs over 5 years that plant's going to, is proposed to have. What is that doing to agriculture in our state? Have we had, and so when we work with DCA and the governor's office, where's ag in those pictures? Gilbert Barrett's on the DCA board. We see that when it's a done deal. Jake Carter's on the Economic Development Board. So we got two farmers, but where's ag? We're not in those conversations. So my challenge would be is that if the number one industry in this state that was going to provide power and this for our economy, are they a part of the conversation? Are we really getting in the ditches and with those type folks? And Mike, I would think if Abbott Massey were here today, he would say, burn down your cities, as William Jennings Bryant, and you've all heard it, burn down your cities and leave our farms, and your cities will spring up again as if by magic, but destroy our farms and the grass will grow in the streets of every city in the country. And as Abraham Baldwin once said, who is founder of post-secondary education and the University of Georgia founder, he said in 1788, as I cross this state and I see the importance and the impact of agriculture, I will predict that for every generation, it will be the industry that sustains our state. And so those are two philosophies that if we, we're in 2023 or 2024 now, I think it's still relevant, but we've got to keep that focus on agriculture. Thank y'all for having ear. Thank you for being in Habersham County and listening to us. And thank you for your service and what you do.
Miss Mallory Osteen, where's she? Oh, way back on. I haven't heard anybody's stomach yet. That growl, so we in good shape.
Hopefully mine's not the first. Good afternoon, all. I'm 5 minutes. Okay. Good afternoon, all. I'm Mallory Osteen. I'm the Georgia Program Manager with American Farmland Trust, and I was invited here today to introduce myself and talk a little bit about the work that we do. Talk a little slower. Talk a little bit about the work that we do. So first, I want to start off by saying I'm an 8th generation Georgian. I have farmers and small business owners in Georgia on both sides of my family going back a long ways. And I have tobacco farming to thank for that. It put my mom through school. So I want to thank you all for your commitment to Georgia's farmland and Georgia's agriculture industry. A little bit about me. I've spent a good chunk of my career actually working with farm families in Georgia to protect their farmland through permanent conservation easement. I've also worked with a lot of counties in Georgia to develop farmland protection programs. So I'm very excited to hear that Jackson County is considering following suit with the SPLOST program. American Farmland Trust is a national organization dedicated to protecting our nation's farmlands and keeping farmers on that land and keeping that land in productive agriculture. For over 42 years, we've worked across the nation at the federal, state, and local level to research and analyze threats to conversion and recommend policies and build programs to protect working lands and support viability of the industry. I understand that one of the priorities of this committee is to understand the state of the issue here in Georgia and then look at what other ag states have been doing. So I have some notes on that and some things that I can add that I'm happy to talk about further as well. So one of the things that American Farmland Trust does is analyze the conversion of farmland across the nation and across time. And we released a report in 2020 that ranked Georgia as 5th in the nation in farmland loss between 2001 and 2016. In 2022, we projected farmland loss out to 2040. And Georgia ranks 4th in that study and across the nation and farmland projected to be converted. I'll note that all of these numbers actually don't take into account solar development, which we're seeing come in at a rapid pace. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So we also looked at some policy scorecards. What are some policies that certain states have in place to address these threats? And while Georgia has a really high ranking score in terms of farmland conversion, we're pretty low on some of the policies that we know work across states. Some of these farmland protection policy incentives I'm going to go into today are things that we can consider. So farmland protection programs, this is something that Georgia started in the last legislative session and we funded. I wanted to emphasize that that's a great way to continue to further opportunities for families to keep their land in agriculture. Research shows that every $1 spent on farmland protection has a multiplier of 2, meaning every $1 we dedicate to farmland protection, you see 2 additional dollars of economic activity generated from that. So in addition to it being really good for county tax rolls, it's also a really good investment. And we also see that families that utilize these conservation easement programs and get financial benefit for doing so tend to reinvest that money back into their farm operations. I've worked with families in Georgia who have gone on to build commercial kitchens with those funds and to increase value-added products or to build kill facilities to increase their cattle operations. Other things that could be looked at are tax incentives, such as capital gains relief for sales to beginning farmers or to farmers. Beginning farmer tax credits, taxes for when land is taken out of agriculture as well. And then another thing I want to talk about that American Farmland Trust is really focused on in the last few years is the solar development. So we've coined a term called smart solar, and we've established a lot of policies and recommendations for how we can see solar development come onto the landscape well. Georgia ranks 7th in solar development across the nation. And we're seeing that cited primarily on farmland. It's because it's flat, it's close to transmission, and it gets access to the sun. And it also pairs well with the issue that we're seeing farming decline as a viable career for many folks. So there are things that can be implemented to, so when not planned for, solar is going to happen on farmland, but there's things we can do to prioritize solar siting in the built environment on contaminated land and on other land not well suited for agriculture. We can also put in policies to safeguard the ability for that land to be used for agriculture after it comes out of solar development. So things that can happen during construction, operation, and decommissioning to ensure that that land is not permanently contaminated. There's also a lot to be done with agrivoltaics. So agrivoltaics is the dual use of land for both solar energy and crops. A lot of states have actually come up with definitions for agrivoltaics, and some are as simple as planting pollinator habitat underneath panels. American Farmland Trust takes it a little bit further. We like to see an actual ag product coming off the land. And the other thing is thinking about the shared benefits of solar development as we put that onto the land. So ensuring that counties and local communities are benefiting from this conversion that we're seeing. I'd be glad to discuss any of this further and would be happy to work with the committee to the extent that you're interested. Thank you.
Just for the community purpose, we've also already talked to Mallory a little bit about maybe coming back to our Moultrie, either Cedartown meeting or either Capitol. So we'll hear more extensive conversation for her at one of those meetings. Mr. London, Stanley London.
My name's Stanley London. I'm a full-time farmer. I've never had a job of any kind. The biggest question I got here today is to help me figure out how I can leave my land to my children and grandchildren where they won't be taxed to death. They won't be burdened. One of the problems, and some of the other speakers said, is my biggest thing is property rights. You know, I don't ever give up my property right, but I would like to have it where my family could continue to farm. The problem is here in North Georgia, our land values got so high, and everybody likes that dollar. I farm roughly 900 acres here in adjoining county. And, I own part of it, other part of rent. And the people that I rent for, the older generation love their land so much, they want it kept in agriculture. But the younger generation sees that dollar. And once it's sold, it's very seldom kept in a farm. I don't have the solution, but I know one thing: we cannot do away with CUVA. We cannot do away with the gate card, and we got to make it more attractability for the younger people to stay. And so I just want you to hear from a true farmer, because I am a true farmer, and I've not got much sense, but I do. I'm a cattle farmer. But I love it so much that I was in a cornfield last night at dark. I was unloading cattle from Kansas this morning at four daylight, and I was putting another load on it, going to Florida before daylight. So I love it. I got a son that loves it. I hope my grandchildren love it. I built a barn dominium trying to make them attractive to stay on the farm. So I want y'all to think about me when you start making recommendations, that to look after us as farmers, because we want to look after our children and our grandchildren. I thank y'all for y'all's time. I do.
And
I appreciate it.
let me just say, both of us have children and both of us are farmers. And so I completely understand where you're coming from.
But I don't need to be here today, but I just want a farmer voice heard. Thank y'all.
Mr. London, actually, my wife Joanne and I are talking about building a barn in a minute, so I might want to talk with you after, get some plans from you. Well, that's true too. Mr. Winston, how you spell it? Last name Shell? Come on up, Lisa, come on up. Say, you do not want to speak, or you do want to? Oh, okay. Well, you wait. Thanks, sir. Well, you're very welcome to. But I appreciate y'all being here the whole time. We really appreciate your attendance. Ms. L'Oreal Price, the Black Table LLC. Oh, same thing? Well, thank you. But again, thank y'all for your attendance today. That's all the speakers that we have. It's been wonderful. I mean, very informative all. And, like I said, the next meeting is going to be September 25th down in Moultrie, Georgia. And Senator Watson, after the meeting, is going to take us on a tour of he's a vegetable farmer down there, vegetable cattle.
He's going to feed everybody steaks, I think.
Steaks and slimy okra. But do we have anybody else want to say anything? If not, we're going to adjourn. Yes, sir. Oh, Drew, I couldn't see you over there.
Family said he's a farmer. I can tell you guys firsthand, and the gentleman serving on this, panel here, they take this serious, all three of them. Senator Adam Sarte, he's on the, he's zoomed in. Let's give them a round of applause for being here.
Drew, I think that'd be a perfect time for you to tell us a little bit about what y'all do with agritourism in a minute or so.
Being you in events as well. All of this has been very informative, and
We had somebody, Mr. Bruce Palmer, is he? Oh, okay, good. Come on forward, please, sir.
Mr. Wills is sitting there like, oh no, he's got the microphone in it. I just want to make a couple of comments. I'm Bruce Palmer. I'm a commissioner here in Habersham County. And I grew up on my grandparents' farm. Unfortunately, one of my cousins is still farming part of it. The rest of it is, for lack of a better way, sitting dormant. And I don't know what my other cousin is going to do with it. But very well possible she may end up developing it instead of farming. And I say that to say there has to be a balance, and I think the state is going to have to help with that balance a little bit. I'm not saying the state needs to step in and take over property rights by any means, but there's, I know there's CUVA, I know there's a gate card, which helps a little bit, but most of the farmers out here are still struggling every day to farm. It's not an easy job. Hasn't ever been an easy job. And the easy part is selling it to a developer. Now, at the same time, I understand we have a housing shortage. I get that. And most folks don't like my idea for fixing the housing shortage. And people have kind of skirted around it a little bit today. I heard somebody say close to the cities where there's water and sewer. That's exactly how to fix the housing shortage, except it's not increasing the lot size. It's actually decreasing the lot size. Where you have water and sewer, put houses on half-acre or quarter-acre lots or townhouses or apartments. That way, we have a set of apartments on 441. It's 156 apartments on 18 acres. If you put 156 houses on a 1 acre lot, how much farmland does that take up? 100, probably 75, 80 acres by the time you do roads and stuff. So farmland, and I hear all the time, and residential housing will not pay for the services that's needed, the taxes. I don't care how high you say your taxes are, your taxes will not pay for the service for that residence. Farmland, on the other hand, how many times does a tree call an ambulance or a fire truck? Very little service is needed. So the taxes, even with CUVA, is more than what the cost to provide service. Now, industrial is the same way. I understand that. And industry also provides a better return per se on taxes. But residential property will not pay for the services. And I think that's another reason we need to look at farmland and protect it, preserve it as much as possible. And that's all. I wasn't too long.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it, sir. Anyone else? Don't want to miss an opportunity. Okay, well, thank y'all for being here. It's a great meeting. And we're adjourned. We'll see you September 25th in Moultrie, Georgia. Appreciate it.
Joanne. Hey, you didn't recognize Joanne.